Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing. I am your host, the Ambassador, and tonight I've got with me a Dega Outlaw and Script Doctor PhD. And on the Ambassadorial Wing this evening, we are going to be covering the unintentional trilogy of Star Trek 2, 3, and 4 from the original series. And to everybody in the chat, Classic Comics, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you for joining us tonight. So, with all that being said, gentlemen, if you want to do some brief introductions, and then we will jump right in.
Well, I'm just here for the ride. I retired doc and love everything sci-fi, and Ambassador is kind enough to let me play in a sandbox for a few hours.
It's a big sandbox, and there's plenty of sand for everybody. And don't sell your...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ambassador.
No, go by all means. Go ahead, Script or anything. Give yourself a introduction to the chat as everybody starts to come on in.
Okay, well, first, hello, Classic Comics and Sci-Fi Nation. Thank you very much for joining us today. I am the Script Doctor, and as you can tell from my avatar, I am a big Star Trek fan, as I'm wearing the same McCoy medical jersey that we see in the original series. I just couldn't help myself. So I am all jazzed up to talk about the accidental trilogy of Star Trek and how quite good it is.
Since I can't see chat, you said Sci-Fi Nation. He's a bud of mine. And you know we got Snow Sci-Fi, so your copy is not in the mail yet. I'm sorry. I'm making promises I haven't been able to keep.
So, ooh, wow. Just another nerd. Welcome, sir. Greetings. Glad you're here. Sci-Fi Nation. Obviously, I think I said hi. I know the fellas did, so glad you are here as well. So, well, anyway, like the gentlemen have said and I have said tonight, we're going to talk with all the badness that's been coming out about Star Trek Picard. I thought we'd flip the script a little bit on the negative side and talk about something a lot more fun and a lot more interesting and obviously a lot more pleasurable and everything, and that being TSO or OTS Star Trek, and in particular the unintentional trilogy, that being Star Trek 2 and 3 and 4. Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and Voyage Home. So we will obviously go in chronological order, which makes more sense, truth be told. And gentlemen, I'm going to open the floor up to you, and we'll start with Star Trek 2, and we'll just kind of go from there, and let's kick it off.
You got the uniform. You're up.
Oh boy. Wow. Where to begin with Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan? Aside from the fact that it was actually quite a brilliantly done story, also with its marketing, because even though it was a few years before I was born, I remember my father and also learning into the history of the movie that people found out that Spock died in the film before it was released. And what ended up happening is that they had that simulation where the entire bridge crew, supposedly dies, and it kind of tricked the audience into realizing, oh, that's what they meant when Spock supposedly dies. So, spoilers if you haven't seen it, when it gets to the end and Spock actually sacrifices himself, it kind of gave everyone that emotional turmoil and catharsis and reaction that was incredibly deep, incredibly resonating, and it's some of the best acting William Shatner has ever done on screen as a result of that. And Leonard Nimoy's ability to sort of show emotion behind an emotionless facade was just something of wonder, really. Just wanted to get that part out of the way because there's so much to say about this movie.
Well, I'd like to get just a little bit before that because I've liked all the movies, JJ ones included. Don't get me wrong, but I think the second one was kind of an answer to the first one. A lot of people didn't like the first one, and I loved it for a lot of reasons because, one, you got real Klingons. You got real Klingon culture. Before it was just, well, these are another humans that with darker skin and cool beards. But to transition that into the next movie, I think it really pushed them to make something exciting. And I'm trying to remember his name, the guy who played Khan. For some reason, I can't
Ricardo
remember his name.
Montalban.
Ricardo
That's the one.
Montalban.
That's the one.
And
My
I actually
mom was in love with that guy. And that, just knowing that he was in there, and for everyone at the time, Ricardo Montalban was a big deal.
oh
And
yeah,
everyone wanted to see it, not just because it was a Star Trek movie, but because this guy was such a phenomenal actor. And you put all the aspects of, like I said, the first movie's mistakes, they corrected it. Better uniforms, better graphics, even though the first one was really nice. They changed the music a little bit, even though that music is still being carried on today. It set itself up with the right writers to be, and still, I think in most people's opinion, that is the best Star Trek movie made.
It's definitely up there. I mean, I've been to various different conventions where the Wrath of Khan and Voyage Home are like a deadlock tie, and yet no one on either side of those argues against the other one being better than the other, which is always fascinating, and a testament to like the best parts of Star Trek fandom.
yeah. Honestly, for me, I don't. The first Star Trek TOS movie I saw in theaters was actually Final Frontier, and while it wasn't the best in hindsight for me, seeing the original Star Trek was the original cast in one of the original cast movies, original series movies, was a real treat and everything, because the trailer looked really good and everything. It looked really interesting. My mom, while she wasn't a huge Star Trek fan, she liked the original show and everything. That's what she grew up on and everything, because she was a kid, she was a teenager in the '60s. And she's like, "Do you want to go see it?" I was like, "Yeah, it's Star Trek," because I had watched reruns of the original series myself and everything, and I was like, "Yeah, let's go see it." And that was my first real exposure to cinematic Star Trek. And although I know a lot of people say the Final Frontier wasn't the best, for me, it holds a special place. But the other thing is, I didn't see any of the three we're going to talk about tonight. I did not see any of them in theaters because I was too young at the time. The only original cast movies I saw were 5 and 6. But I have had a lot of opportunity to go back and rewatch 2, 3, and 4 on either VHS or DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. And the interesting thing is, I actually had the opportunity back last year with my wife and one of my professors from the university and his wife and everything. We went to a special showing of Star Trek 2 and everything at a theater and everything where I live. And the other neat thing was they had a Q&A and photo op with William Shatner afterwards. And I can say I got my picture. Me and my wife got our picture taken with William Shatner. So,
that's pretty awesome.
That is
cool. And the Q&A was fun. You get a real sense that he's in his 80s now, and he has kind of reconciled himself to the fact that this is his claim to fame, and he has made peace with it more or less. But the thing was, we didn't talk about just Star Trek specifically. He talked about all sorts of stuff during the Q&A session. And his sense of humor is so off the wall and so cornball that it's honestly very refreshing, truth be told. And here's the interesting thing. I don't know if anybody knows this. William Shatner, and I'm not saying this as a negative, it's just something I did not know, is that William Shatner is actually Jewish.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people knew that one.
And Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, Leonard Nimoy, I did know. And I want to say, Sci-Fi Nation, welcome, sir. Glad you're here. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Hey, one good turn deserves another. You had me on. It's only fair. Not to mention, we're talking sci-fi. We're talking Star Trek. So,
Oh, hey, there you go. Fits right in.
yep. We're just getting our initial thoughts out. We're going to jump into. We're going to go chronologically, talking about 2, 3, and 4. We're going to start with 2 first. So, like I say, I'm gonna open the floor to you, gentlemen. What do you want?
There's a lot of good things, and I started saying all the good things about 2. There was one thing that I wasn't, and I'm still not quite a fan of, even though I think it was the best one. 2 things, actually. One was really good, and one was kind of off. This is where we learn about the Kobayashi Maru, at least in detail, what Kirk did. And then the other thing is, Saavik, I think that's her name. The other Vulcan.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't act as much like a Vulcan.
She's
I
a Vulcan
thought that character
Romulan.
was played wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me?
She was actually well, I mean, in some of the books and some of the memory alpha, she is a part Vulcan, part Romulan.
Yeah, she's actually.
Well, see, we didn't know that at the time the movie came out.
Yeah, the movie doesn't actually. Yeah,
and
the movie doesn't
Vulcans
tell you
didn't
that.
act like that.
Yeah.
So I think that was a kind of a CYA afterwards for the not being. She didn't play the part the way it should have been. But either way, that's the only beef I had about that movie.
Yeah, because she was a bit more emotional and a bit more aggressive compared to what we're used to with Spock. And on top of that, like, rarely in the original series, aside from, I guess, Mark Leonard and a few day players, do we actually get to see what Vulcans truly behave like. We only ever got to see it through the eyes of Spock. And I wouldn't be surprised if, especially during the film series with Harv Bennett as producing and Nicholas Meyer trying to reel in Shatner during the production of that one, that everybody on set, aside from Leonard Nimoy, truly understood what a Vulcan would behave. Because even in number 6 with Kim Cattrall, she did not really quite behave like a Vulcan either.
Yeah, but there was a little precedence when they had in this original series with the Ponfar. Because there's a whole bunch of Vulcans there, and you got to see their traditions and stuff, and they all acted logical.
Well, a lot of them acted silently too, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it again. That's the only episode aside from Mark Leonard's appearance that we actually get to see Vulcans and a bit more about how they act with others. Gosh, the name is escaping me for the actress who played T'Pau in that, but she was able to still be logical while also being kind of a little dramatically eccentric for the role.
True.
Well, and I will say of the two actresses that played Saavik, I liked both of them. I liked Robin Curtis and I liked Chris Yalley and everything. Fun fact about Robin Curtis, she actually had a reoccurring role as an alien on Babylon 5. I think at least in season 1, if not through all the seasons. Because there was one alien and everything, it was a pink-skinned and everything, pink-skinned alien that had like a fin that ran along the top of their head. And I recognized the voice. And I watched the credits at the end, and it was Robin Curtis, which I actually thought was really cool. So I haven't checked out her IMDb or anything, but I was impressed that she would come on to another sci-fi property, considering she had a past in it. So, sci-fi, you haven't really said much or anything. You want to chime in with your 2 cents?
Yeah, I was just see if anyone else had noticed that the guy that played Jakar on B5 also played a Romulan in TNG. I think he played Tomalak.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, Andreas Katsoulis. Yeah.
Excellent actor.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
well, I was going to say, it's not a sci-fi connection, but the guy that played Veer, he played in Animal House.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, he played Flounder. Stephen First was the actor's name.
And then they had Katie Hodgins who was in Babylon 5. She was also in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. You got Bruce Boxleitner, who is also Tron. So, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of crossover science fiction and adventure with the cast.
Absolutely.
Oh, and don't forget Billy Mumi, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because wasn't he?
Space.
Yeah, he was in Lost in Space, and he played Lanier. I'm actually going to be. I'm eventually going to do a live stream, and I'm going to wrap up my character discussions. Everything I'm going to do on do that on Marcus Cole. I'm going to do it on Veer, and I'm going to do it on Lanier.
One thing I have to ever get back on track and jumping characters and stuff. Those of you who've seen it, Ricardo Montalban was just, and I said it before, he was such a great actor that I think the casting of Cumberbatch for the pseudo remake, was probably one of the few guys that actually could play the role. Because Ricardo Montalban just did such a phenomenal job. It would have taken, you eliminate most of the male actors in Hollywood, they just couldn't do it, and it was really good to see that he could.
Well, I think personally, if Al Pacino would have been 20 years younger, he could have played it. Just because of when he, the scene of that one movie, I forget the name of it, but say hello to my little friends.
Scarface.
Scarface.
Yeah. You put that kind of acting into a Khan remake, and I think it could have worked.
Well, the only problem was I don't think Pacino was a known actor at the time when the original series was on TV, because you had Montalban play Khan in the Space Seed episode, so they were trying to keep continuity between who played Khan in the TV show and who played Khan in the movie. But
also, Ricardo Montalban was pretty well recognized for Fantasy Island at that time.
That too, yeah.
No, I think it's great they brought him back, to play Khan in Star Trek 2. I mean, if they would have got a different actor, I don't think that movie would have done as well as it did.
Well, it wouldn't have that respectful nod to the fandom. That's for sure.
Oh yeah,
people would just be asking why
he played Khan. I was going to say he played Khan very cerebrally, but it wasn't so cerebral that you couldn't understand what was going through his mind.
Yeah, no, he played it with his emotions on his sleeve, which was his greatest flaw in both Space Seed and The Wrath of Khan.
Well, and the other thing about Montalban that he brought both to his portrayal in the TV episode and the movie, I'm gonna use a kind of the theatrical word. He brought gravitas to that part. Now, Khan could have been played very campy, very cheesy, very one note, but both in the TV show and continuing on into the movie, he was not. So, I think for anybody else to try and do that role, it would be difficult. The only what's the word I'm looking for? The only disadvantage that Cumberbatch did not have was there was a pre-established character per se within the Kelvin timeline of Khan for him to get a sense of. He took bits and pieces from Montalban's portrayal, and he also added in what I don't know if he ever read any of the books or anything that Khan was involved in, like the eugenics wars or whatever, but
that whole movie was a attempt at fan service, and I know a lot of people didn't appreciate it. And the part where Kirk died instead of Spock, I thought was pretty cheesy, triple blood. But it's hard to find, and this is what I was talking about actors and why he did it. And the script doctor would know this better than I would. But when you see actors or actresses on screen, and we know a lot of people who can't do this, when you can look at their eyes and they tilt their head just a certain way with the facial muscles working, you can read what they're thinking, where other ones have to try and play at using words or using their whole body to communicate it, where others that like Cumberbatch or most of the crew on the second movie, where you could tell what they were trying to come across just by real subtle actions. And it just amazes me that people could do that.
Well, not all actors can do that, unfortunately, but some really know the capabilities of their own facial expressions. Well, Cumberbatch did pretty good for his portrayal of Khan. Was the way he held his shoulders and around his chest area. It was very Montalbanish from the original series.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like just focusing on because Ricardo Montalban has a naturally large chest. Like a lot of people say it was a rubber chest. I've heard otherwise, and when I see him in other roles, it's kind of like he was kind of still pretty fit in his age.
Well, here's the thing, and actually, Shatner told this story about Montalban. He had been in some sort of accident, or his legs had gotten injured or something, and he spent at least 2 or 3 months, if not more, doing a lot of upper body exercising and weight training and everything, and that's why his upper body was as defined as it was. That was not a rubber chest. It was not prosthetic. That was all Montalban.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, he was even big in the TOS too, though. I mean,
Yeah, he was a big guy.
Always a fit guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was.
Oh, yeah.
He was no. And I think the other neat thing about Khan, this is obviously a guy that was very imposing, physically, but he also gave the impression that this was a person that was very intimidating mentally. He could think his way around a problem or through a problem because of his genetic engineering and what have you. But he didn't necessarily, I don't think he necessarily took it for granted. Now, if y'all disagree, that's okay and everything. But this is a guy, while he was extremely cocky, but he was also extremely capable. So,
yeah, he was Yes. Oh, sorry. Go right ahead first. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think he played to the script, very well. The way the genetic engineering went, and especially with the having the higher intelligence, the higher strength, and he did it, very coldly, very calculating. But as soon as something didn't go right, he snapped,
oh yeah,
with a quickness. And I think he played into that part better than anyone else could have, I think, and really carried that vision of what the eugenics wars were all about into the TOS timeline. And then to bring that back into the movie and just expand on that was just, I don't know. I don't think anyone else really could have done it quite the way he did. I think he portrayed it the way it needed to be portrayed at that time.
Well, speaking of snapping, I'm kind of getting off to another character, and this is another thing that I thought was really good, with Kirk when he was trapped inside the moon, and then he was yelling at Khan, that classic.
Mm-hmm. Oh
but
yeah,
he was an actor acting, if that makes sense. His character in the movie was acting out like being angry because he knew Spock was right around the corner. He was playing it up. And to make that look good on screen, and then as soon as he was on the ship, it was like, oh yeah, this is a matter of fact. How he can change into that alternate persona. I mean, not persona, but it's just I can't underestimate how good of an actor he was.
Well, here's the interesting thing about Kirk / Shatner. Shatner and script, you might be able to speak to this a little better than I could. When he was playing Kirk, he was playing Kirk. But the minute the cameras went off, he was Shatner again. and he was kind of a joke. He was kind of a jokester. He was a funny guy and everything. You kind of pick up on that and everything. Or I did pick up on that in the Q&A that me and my wife and everything sat in on with him. He has a very witty, kind of dry, maybe a little sarcastic sense of humor, but for his personality, it seems to work.
Just another
And-
Canadian like sci-fi.
Hardy har har.
Well, Adega, I hate to burst your bubble, but I'm a fourth Canadian myself on my grandfather's side.
Oh, I'm full Canadian. I just work in the United States.
I'm surrounded.
Well, I was born in the U.S. in the great state of Indiana, and my parents are both American, and I will never throw any shade or anything at anybody from Canada. Although I do feel bad for those of you that have to deal with Justin Trudeau. There, I said it.
Oh, it's not even just that. Him and Doug Ford are just like two opposites of the same coin, but like, let's not get into that part. That's
No,
another
let's not. Let's stay on track here.
Yeah.
I think.
So,
yeah.
So it's to your point, Ambassador. Like, yeah, Shatner. He always has his great wit about himself. Even like in the 70s, like when he was doing Rocket Man, like he did that mostly as a joke, but some people thought he did it as seriously. But like he was also a guy who Nicholas Meyer kind of drove him nuts during filming of that, because he was never satisfied with the earlier takes that Shatner was giving of Kirk. It wasn't until Shatner kind of figured out that he wanted a more relaxed performance out of him for the role of Kirk that started working out better, because there's the first exchange between Kirk and Khan, like when Khan comes up on the view screen. The story goes that Shatner had to do that about 30 times.
Wow.
That doesn't surprise me.
Because Meyer just was not liking Shatner, the way Shatner does some of the Shatnerisms, where he puts it a little bit extra dramatic not so much dramatic pause, but dramatic emphasis is what I meant to say on certain words. And Meyer was like, no, I'm not having any of that. Like, this is not. That's the young Kirk. This is a more experienced Kirk. This is a more reserved Kirk. Still same character, but just something that has learned from his experience and mistakes. So he just tried to get Shatner to do that. And oddly enough, it was something that William Shatner carried with him for the rest of the movies that he did. Because if you notice in that first one where he's like saying to Bones, "I need you," and like, Spock, please sit down. He's like giving all that high extra emphasis, but he doesn't repeat that type of stuff, that type of a take on the character anymore. And to also go back a little bit to Ricardo Montalban, one of the things that he said once in an interview is that Khan is the type of man who values the intelligence part of his genetic engineering more so than his strength, and anything that allows him to go to a physical means he feels is beneath him. And he said in his own head, that's what kind of attributed Khan to being able to take over like so much of the world during the eugenics wars, the fact that he wasn't about the brute force, he was about the intellect, and where all the others were about the brute force. So I think that's kind of what sort of made his approach to this character written on the page so unique and so desirable to watch. And everything that Kirk does is just to try and get him to make an aggressive move, because Kirk is betting on the aggressiveness taking over his rationality and making a mistake. The whole arguing to get Khan to come down to the moon to bait him. Kirk's thinking, okay, if he comes down the move, I can at least, he's there. I can do something physically to him and knock him off guard. Kind of like a two-prong approach. The first being, okay, I can get him to the moon and then figure out something there to take him out, or he doesn't come into the move and I just have to wait for Spock to pick us up and then we can get away or attack or whatever. So you kind of see this really clever, experienced captain who's thinking ahead, and also by the seat of his pants at the same time.
Right. Like a poor marksman, you keep missing the target. That was like the ultimate stab in his ribs to say, Gotcha.
Oh, and there's
Well,
there's a lot of great lines in that movie. My favorite
Yes.
being the exchange between Kirk and McCoy on Regular One, where Kirk's like, "Okay, we're gonna beam down," and McCoy's like, well, "Suppose they went nowhere," and Kirk's like, "Well, this is your chance to get away from it all," and just like it plays
Yeah.
such into like years and years of that character, of those two characters and their own debates. Just perfect timing on it and everything. It's so much fun in that film.
Yeah, the
Right.
writing, but the writing for the interactions between the main characters, I thought it carried really well. It showed there wasn't this actual real time divide between the series and the movies, and to me, it made the characters seem like who they are supposed to be. It didn't have any of this. Well, this is just a movie; they're just saying it type of thing. It
Oh
actually
yeah.
felt like the characters.
Oh
That does say
yeah.
a
It's
lot for the
unbelievable.
director too.
Yeah. Have any of you guys heard the interview that Midnight's Edge did with Nicholas Meyer a while back? It's actually quite good. Not only does it talk about Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan and Undiscovered Country, but a couple of his miniseries and his Sherlock Holmes work. So after this stream, I recommend you go search that out and give it a watch, because it's quite a good interview about Star Trek and the creative process and how he kind of had to rewrite that script on the fly before they went into production.
You got me curious because I didn't hear it.
I'll have to
I
check that
didn't
out.
watch it.
Well, and here's another interesting thing about Wrath of Khan, because I think most everybody here knows, and I think everybody in chat knows, that while motion picture did, I think, break even, or it did make some money for Paramount, it wasn't the big overwhelming success that they were hoping for. Because that was actually, if I recall correctly, it was made in response to Star Wars. Because Paramount was trying to get in on their piece of the sci-fi market and everything back in the 70s and 80s. And they're like, okay, we're going to do one more movie, but we want to bring in somebody that knows what the heck they're doing. And they went out and they went after Nicholas Meyer and Harve Bennett, if I remember correctly. And they got both of those guys on board. And Meyer directed, am I right?
Yeah, Meyer directed and kind of ghost wrote the script.
Yeah. And Meyer went through every single episode of the original show, and he's like, "Here's the show I want to do a movie on." And he picked Space Seed because he's like, "I think I can go somewhere with this." And Paramount was on the fence and anything about whether or not this thing was actually going to be any good. But then it hit like gangbusters and everything in '82, and it was the reason why the Star Trek movies got the backing that they did, and why there was kind of a resurgence of interest in the original series itself, and why I think honestly why we got anything else down the road. If it had not been for Wrath of Khan, I don't think we would have ever gotten any further movies from the original cast, much less I don't think we would have gotten TNG or anything else.
Well, I don't know. Go ahead, Adiga.
I was just going to say I agree with that.
Well, really think about this. I mean, because while Star Trek, there's always been the great debate, which is better, Star Trek or Star Wars? You really can't compare the two because they're in two different genres of science fiction. Because Star Wars is more science fantasy, and I've kind of mentioned this in some other videos I've done, whereas Star Trek is more science future or true science fiction, whatever way you want to categorize it. So,
no, that's a very accurate comparison. Like Star Wars is definitely a fantasy story in space, science fantasy, and Star Trek is fictional allegorical stories set in the final frontier. It's they're their own brand, they're their own unique. They don't need to cross over. They don't need to butt heads with each other. they're separate enough that you can enjoy both without any issues. The fan like films and fan stories where those two franchises meet are absolutely entertaining.
Yes, they are.
Great like speculation stuff to have fun with.
Oh yeah.
And that's like the best part about it is that, like, yeah, you don't have to compel these two franchises to be together, but to just think about them is also a lot of fun in itself because they're very different approaches to adventure stories.
Yes. Well, the other thing that they did with Wrath of Khan is they tried to introduce an interesting conflict between. A lot of people have always said that the key or the core group of the TOS was the dynamic of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and you very much see that throughout the TOS movies. Now, do the other characters have their moments? Yes, they do. Uhura does. Chekhov does. Scotty does.
Chekhov has that great scream in Wrath of Khan.
Oh man, we'll get to that scene here in a few
Yeah,
minutes.
we will. Yes.
Yeah, we will absolutely get. We will get to that scene here in a few minutes. But what you had in Wrath of Khan is you had Kirk, Spock, and McCoy going up against the intellect of Khan. And I love that. I absolutely enjoy that scene where they're going through the debriefing video of the Genesis project. And there, Kirk turns it off, turns around, and says, "Thoughts." And you have a very logical and analytical response from Spock, obviously. He's not going to go hyperbolic. But then you get a very hyperbolic, very knee-jerk reaction from Bones. But neither one of them are in error or in the wrong in how they reacted. Because I think, well, I understand what Spock is saying. I understand even more so what Bones was saying. He's like, go ahead.
Oh, well, the brilliance of that conversation between Spock and Bones is the fact that they're both arguing the same point, but they just have a different approach of how its results are. Bones is thinking about the human life ability of it, and Spock is thinking about the logical mechanics of it and how it's, they're both bad. Like, if it's used where somebody lives, it will replace all life with something new and essentially destroy it. And it's very matter-of-factly, and Bones is like, yes, it's incredibly matter-of-factly, but you got to think it's more than that. It's absolutely evil, and Spock's not debating that part. He's just like, yeah, that's the fact of it. I'm not, it's evil, but like, and Bones is only upset by the fact that there's no emotion from Spock on that, as opposed to the actual content of the words. And he makes a great argument about, it not only it's the name of the Genesis probe, but also like what it's actually doing. It's trying to say we're better than the creation, than God. And even though there's not really a whole lot of religious identification from many of the characters in Star Trek, it kind of shows a little bit of respect with regards to the myths and the lore and the lessons of the Bible.
Yes.
So it makes it really a much more interesting scene as you kind of rewatch it over and over again, picking up some of the newer ideas and the newer things that they were just seeding in there very subtly about the implications of playing with God and essentially repeating some of the ideas that were postulated when the Manhattan Project was being done.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, brilliant conversation and storytelling and character development with these guys. So.
Yeah, because you're building on 3 years of character development.
Brilliant
conversation. What was I saying? You're building on 3 years of character development from the TOS. You're building on further character development from the motion picture, which, love it or hate it, whatever the case, you do have some good character development in that movie, particularly with Spock. Because I think the great thing is you see an evolution of Spock's character, even though he does have a setback in Star Trek 3, which we'll get to in due course. But this story it talks a lot about a lot of big, in some instances, theological ideas, but it also talks about a lot of scientific ideas as to what the human mind eventually could come up with. And that is the idea that we will advance so far technologically that we can figure out a way to create life on our own or create worlds on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh yeah, it brings up the terraforming aspect as well.
Mm-hmm.
It also kind of sets a definitive timeline that replication technology, as we know it from the next generation, doesn't actually exist so much, because they're talking about the reason to do this is to battle shortages of food and resources and colonization, all things that are essentially kind of solved in a way with the replicator, except for like the terraforming part. But we see, like, yeah, there's still problems in the future, even, but they're far more grand scale problems as opposed to like social issues and whatnot. So it was pretty cool to see, like, Carol Marcus is an active character. She came up with this idea, she put it into play, and now we have Khan, who's also an active character. He finds out about this device, and he wants to use it for to make his own planet and start his own life with it after he gets his revenge on Kirk for being abandoned. And then Kirk's an active character because he hears the call to adventure from Carol, and he's like, okay, we got to go do something about this. So what's brilliant about the Star Trek, especially this trilogy, is that there's nothing passive about it, and we get sometimes those things, especially in the JJ stuff. There's a little bit of passivity to the characters. They're not so much active as they are reactive and trying to avoid conflict, as opposed to in the original movies, it's trying to solve the issue that the conflict presents. So that's what I think makes those sets of movies elevated in Star Trek above the others.
Mm-hmm. Adaga, sci-fi, your thoughts?
Well, the one thing about the, JJ Trek is, I just want to say, I know a lot of people don't like it, but one thing I can appreciate about it is they said right from the get-go, this is in an alternate timeline.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They were upfront about that. So taking that for what it is, I can actually sit back and enjoy the movies for what they are, without saying, "Oh, it should have been this. Oh, it should have been that." They were honest and said, "Look, this is an alternate timeline." Okay, great. And I think what a lot of people now with Discovery, not to get off topic, but are having a problem with is, how everything looks JJ-ish. But at the same time, I understand people want to sit back and hate and this, that, and the next thing. But you know what? I'd rather have Trek, even if it is horrible, than have no Trek at all. But that's just the way I feel. I mean, could they improve? Oh, definitely, for sure. But then again, I'd rather have something to watch and have, the Trek legacy, so to speak, continue on. That's why I'm just glad we're getting new stuff. It's probably not going to be the greatest, but you know what? It's better than not having it at all. Because you can only rewatch the original series and the other series so many times before you get it memorized.
Right, well, for me, I agree with you. It's an alternate timeline. I like most of the JJ stuff. I said I liked it all, but I remember the last movie was something I'd rather forget that I actually paid money to see. The only problem I have with these alternate timelines and remakes is sometimes there is either almost a disrespect for the original, and other times it is the writers are nowhere near the quality of the ones who did the original work, and so that in itself looks like, you know what, why didn't you just wait till you had better writers, or someone who doesn't have an agenda, or someone who actually is a fan can make an alternate universe, but do it from the basis of being a fan, not someone who's trying to make a quick buck, or stroke someone, or play on the emotions of Hollywood or something. Just consider it a fan film instead of an alternate timeline, and then I think it would be a lot better. But like I said, the JJ stuff for most of his films, I enjoyed, but the last one not so much.
Well, that was James Wan, I think, that did the last one, Star Trek Beyond.
Okay, well,
Into
James Wan
Darkness
failed.
was the last
Did great
JJ
for
one.
Aquaman, but he didn't do good for Star Trek.
Or was it Justin
Well-
Lin? I get those two confused sometimes, just because it's the one's did the Saw series and the other one did Fast and Furious. Consider just my ignorance on that part, but yeah, well, like Star Trek Beyond was it tried to felt more like an episode of the show, but it still had a lot of the flavor, I guess, that JJ had established, and I know that's what a lot of other fans weren't too pleased about. My only qualms with Star Trek, especially the first one that JJ made, was the time jumps. I'm not a fan of time jumps. You're essentially restarting your story from the beginning again. And even though, and it just makes those extra points purely exposition as opposed to like entertaining scenes of growth, because a lot changes from a character at the age of 9 to the character when he's like in his 20s. Like there's a whole nother story there. So what does it matter that we saw Kirk as a teenager steal a car and drive it into a ditch, and then come back, 10, 20 years later and see that he's just at a bar hitting on Uhura? It just felt like you didn't need that first one at all. Like it just didn't add anything to his character. And even some of the stuff that had with Spock, it was all just there to be there and look cool. It didn't have the same. It didn't have an emotional impact that they were intending to give it. Aside from, I guess, the birth scene between George Kirk and his wife, and she's on the shuttle. Like that was a pretty good scene.
Yeah.
But it also plays into another issue, and this one I know from personal experience on multiple spectrums, because it all goes this way. But to lose a parent, it's a lot more impactful if it's a parent that you grew up with as opposed to one that you never got to see. When I lost my father in my 20s, you get a flood of memories that your mind is trying to hold on to, so it's hard to sort everything out. Of course, my best friend, who his father passed away a few weeks before he was born, he never knew the person, and he has that desire to know them, but it just, if he found out, like, if there was a person that, like, if he passed away through nefarious means as opposed to unfortunately natural ones, he'd be like, yeah, I'd be wanting revenge on that guy, but it just wouldn't feel the same because I wouldn't know what I'm missing. And that's kind of like what we ended up getting with Star Trek 2009 is he wants, Kirk essentially kind of wants a little bit of revenge against Nero for killing his dad, but it's kind of downplayed, and he's talking about the regret and the absence, and it just didn't feel true, I guess, in my opinion, from that. But say, had you got rid of the time jumps and just said Kirk is an ensign on a ship somewhere, and then he hears over subspace that his father's on a ship, and he just rammed it in to Nero's ship to save his wife and crew, then you have far more dramatic and emotional connection. Like his father, who he knew and grew up with and who inspired him to join Starfleet, has just sacrificed himself to save a crew against this Romulan terrorist, as it were. And now Kirk is emotionally driven to the point where he wants to do everything he can to get revenge. That would have been a far more easier and simpler story for audiences to grasp on and have a dramatic connection to and really get some sort of satisfaction out of it. But because they did time jumps and they restart the story like 3 times, I think, for that, it just it didn't feel like it had the impact that it was supposed to have, for me at least.
I think I kind of give it a little forgiveness, and you're absolutely right. Don't get me wrong. I just, that for some reason I kind of give that some forgiveness for doing it, the way you were describing it, it just seems like the old Star Trek was cerebral and good acting, good writing. The newer stuff is hop on the roller coaster. I can't remember, was it Scorsese who was saying that about all the new Marvel shows? You know,
Yeah,
it's
like a
like
theme park
you're going to a
ride.
theme park. Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. And you know, first, you're right. Don't get me wrong. And for some reason, usually I'm a very try to be cerebral. I do it with my writing and everything else. Um, but I don't know why I forgive those. I guess I was just Star Trek, maybe.
There's nothing wrong with liking it. I'm coming at it from the perspective of how can you get the most out of the subject matter with the resources that you have, and the brilliance that made Star Trek is the fact they didn't have essentially unlimited funds to do spectacle. They knew that whatever spectacle they had to be really, really good and was very limited. So what it does is it forces the creative process or the creative team, writers, directors, producers, to think, what can we do to make the stuff that isn't a special effect outshine the special effect. Whereas in JJ's interpretation, it was more about the special effect than the characters to bring drama to that. And
Yeah,
one thing that, yeah,
I think it was the second season of TOS. I'm pretty sure it was the second, maybe it was the third, where they didn't have any money and they were forced into doing that. They had to write really well because they couldn't do the space combat scenes. They couldn't do the away
Mm-hmm.
team scenes to planets. They had to stick with the sets that they had on the
on the
movie
Paramount
lot.
lot, yeah, at Desilu, yeah, anything that was available at
Mhm.
Desilu, they had to write to keep costs down because they were facing cancellation during the second season. They were then canceled and brought back for a third season, then canceled again. Um, so it's a lot of yeah. I mean, it rewarded us with some very amazing episodes. To the benefit. The same thing happened with the William Dozier Batman series. However, um, it was the third season when they introduced Batgirl where it really started to wane because they had an episode order they had to meet, which was like 30 odd episodes for a TV season, which is crazy nowadays to think about. But back then it was considered a little bit above the norm. But you get the most creativity out of that. That's why I'm a fan of Christopher Nolan. But when he's given those giant budgets for his films, it's like, well, he doesn't have to be as creative anymore because if he says, I want to try this scene, he's going to be able to afford to do it, and it's not going to force him to sort of think more creatively about how can I get that same emotional response done, but through character and minimal action as opposed to just pure action, and then we have the characters. Same thing comes to like a fight scene between, like for instance, Khan and Kirk in Spacey. That fight scene at the end in the engineering, that is all built up from the character interaction that they had prior in
Mm-hmm.
that episode. Like if they just started fighting at the beginning, we would feel nothing for it. It'd be like, okay, it's a cool fight, but it doesn't have any meaning. There's no relationship between those two characters to give it meaning, which is what we actually end up feeling in Star Wars: The Phantom Menace when Darth Maul comes in and those Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and those him are fighting together. Those three, it's a cool fight, but there's not really any emotion to it. Not anything near compared to Luke
Mm-hmm.
and Vader's two duels in the original trilogy, and
Yeah.
that comes down to the effort in the character, how much we know them, how much we understand their motivation, their goals, their relationships with those that they interact with. That's all far more important than the fun with lightsabers or fun with phasers or spaceships clashing into each other. Like that stuff is great on its own, but it just has more gravity, more impact, more an easier time to remember and feel something when you put the work into the characters. And
Yeah.
I think that's conversely what a lot of other fans of Star Trek have issues with regarding Discovery, because there's so much focus on one character and not enough on any of the others, and it's traditionally an ensemble piece, so that when a character dies, we don't feel anything, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
And
to go back to Wrath of Khan,
mhm.
when Spock dies, we feel it.
Oh yeah. And we're gonna have a couple of guys a couple people coming in, fellas. And I think Kathia Starr is going to be coming in, and I think Speaker for the Dead is going to be coming in here in just a few minutes too. So,
Oh, great.
welcome, Kathia Starr. Kathia, welcome. Thank you for
good.
coming.
Hi, fellas.
Just a quick second. I've noticed on the device I use that when there's 2, 3 people, it's okay. 4, it gets muddy. Now that there's 5, I'm sorry. I can't hear you guys because my sound cuts out. So I'm going to have to cut out. I'm going to be in the chat room.
Okay. Well, and if anybody decides to bow out and everything, I will bring you back in.
I
So.
feel his pain. I had the same issues when I was broadcasting from my cell phone, so I know exactly what he's going through.
Okay. Well, and like I said, if anybody decides to bow out, we'll bring Dega back in. I appreciate all his input. I'm sure he'll stay active in the chat. He usually does on my streams. So, Kathia, thank you for coming, dear. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and I figured out and there's improvement.
Good. Good job. Okay. Well, and to kind of bring us back on track with Wrath of Khan, the other interesting thing is, and okay, before I get into that, sci-fi, is it gonna be a problem having 5 on your end or anything?
No, I'm good. I'm on my PC right now.
Okay, all right. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Speaker for the Dead. Speaker, thank you for coming tonight, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I know you've bounced. I know we've seen each other in chats before and everything, and glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
Well, the topic was really interesting. I'm a total Star Trek nut. So
yeah. So, I was kind of bringing some back around because we had kind of gone down a little bit of a rabbit trail and everything. Something that script had hit upon was the fact that they had to do a lot of good, solid writing for TOS because of budgetary restraints. Here's the interesting thing about Wrath of Khan. They didn't have a big budget for this. I think the budget for Wrath of Khan was not that big. Okay, script, that's fine. Because here's the fun fact about Wrath of Khan. They actually basically just use the same bridge set for Wrath of Khan and everything for the for Reliant and for Enterprise. They just redressed it. So
well, I don't think there's really a huge problem with that. I mean, the ships were basically from the same era. I mean, granted, that's the first time we saw a Miranda class. But I think for the era, it only makes sense. I mean, if you look at the way Starfleet was building ships at the time, most of them were fairly modular in design.
Yeah,
which held true through the TNG era to some extent. But back then, when they had the Klingons on one front, the Romulans on another front, the last thing you want to do is have all these intricate, fancy designs with all these separate parts. So you want to make it the fleet as modular as possible, I would think.
Well, and here's an interesting thing. This isn't going terribly off topic. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Axanar group. Anything Aries Studios? They're doing the Axanar, the movies and the Axanar.
I'm very familiar.
Okay,
Axanar.
Yeah, they're great.
I think. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing that they're doing, I didn't catch on to them until I saw the Axanar Prelude and everything, the fan movie that was like, I think 40 minutes or so long, or no, it was maybe about 20 minutes long. I don't remember right off the top of my head. You see the evolution of the ships and everything because Axanar, if I understand the timeline correctly, takes place before TOS.
Yes, it takes place right after the Battle of Axanar, basically.
Oh, is that like Garth of Izar thing?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. That's Alec Peters.
Yeah. I read the script that's on Robert Meyer Burnett's website. I was not a fan of the script. I didn't think it was very good, in my opinion, but that's just me. But yeah, that's supposed to take place prior to Kirk. I think before Kirk even entered the academy, right? Because he studied those tactics in the academy.
I think so. That sounds about right.
Yeah, he said. Yeah,
Excuse
Kirk
me,
said
guys.
he had.
Excuse me, guys. I was wondering if Script Doctor could repeat the person that he said that he read the script on. Familiar with that? Like to look that up later.
Oh yeah, sure. It's Robert Meyer Burnett. You can find it at theburnettwork.net.
And he
helped with the special effects on the fan film. Is my understanding.
Yeah, he does editing too.
Yeah,
and he was a documentarian for the Next Generation when they did the
Blu-rays,
the big Blu-rays. Yeah,
yeah. I know his actual career. I was a little unfamiliar with his fan film stuff until he advertised it on his channel, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll take a look at the script. So yeah, it should be there. Check it out. I think it's
Axanar actually has an unfair advantage because they don't have a budget, so they can keep themselves as close to the original TOS as anything that's ever come, cause they are forced into having little to no budget and not professionals. So advantage here, it's actually Axanar by default.
Well, I mean, if they have a low budget, they have to be more creative. It all depends on do they have the right team to get the most out of that. So we can cross our fingers for them. Yeah.
If I could just interject on that point, if you really want to find out about that, Alec does. I think he's live now. It's on the Axanar YouTube channel. He does Axanar After Dark. He also does Axanar Confidential on Friday nights.
Yep.
And he talks a lot about their process and what all is involved with it.
Yeah, and there's also the Axanar Comics channel as well that works in concert with them because they've actually been putting out, I don't know if it's physical or digital, but they've been doing a comic series and anything that deals with the storyline within the Axanar universe, for lack of a better term.
Axanar Comics. Trey McAway runs that channel, and that's the
not too long.
Yes, he did. He actually, he was the first time I came across Adega was actually during a live stream on the Axanar Comics channel, and Adega did the narration during. They had it was a digital comic and everything that was playing across the screen, and Adega did all the dialogue boxes, did all the narration for that issue or whatever. And that was my first real introduction to Adega, and after that, I went and hunted down his channel and found all his fan fictions that he has written and he has done storylines for and videos for.
Adega is the actual. He's the official voice narration for Axanar Comics.
Yeah, I think that was the impression I got. But jumping back on topic, I will say about Wrath of Khan. Well, I wholeheartedly agree that you don't need a lot of big, flashy space battles for Star Trek because that's not the theme or the thrust of Star Trek. It's much more intellectual. It's somewhat more cerebral, I guess would be a fair
well, Wrath of Khan was a battle of wits, experience versus genetics, so to speak.
Well, and not only that, I listened to, and I imagine most everybody else has. I listened to the director's commentary by Meyer, and he said he wanted this to have very much like the final battle in particular, have a feel of a submarine battle, and everything, particularly when they're in the Mutara Nebula.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of like it's like a cat and mouse game, except it's like submarine battle, except it's in space because you've got that pinging, like the sonar going off on a submarine bridge, and you finally have Enterprise get the drop on Khan on the Reliant, and obviously blow him to smithereens. The thing I will say about the Reliant and everything, that model, the Miranda class ship, and again, this might be something everybody knows. The ship was actually supposed to be inverted.
Yeah, it's upside down.
Yeah, it's upside down. The nacelles were actually supposed to be on top, exactly like the Enterprise, but they flipped it and how they built it. And
all because the one producer signed his name on it upside down, and they thought that's how he wanted it, so that's what they did.
But I think, yeah, it did. Well, and I think, unless I'm correct, I may not be incorrect in thinking this, the Miranda class was much more of it had a much more aggressive design to it. It seemed like this was the Federation's answer to a semi-pure combat vessel rather than exploration and defense vessel. Considering the weapons placement.
We're talking about the original Wrath of Khan, correct?
Yeah, we're not talking about Into Darkness. We're talking about the TOS movies.
Okay.
See, in the books, it was always described as the workhorse of the fleet.
Okay.
Well, I'm seeing Wrath of Khan from a different perspective. I actually don't like it as much as Trek fandom, and that comes down to, I mean, if the ships are great, the ships are wonderful, and stuff is as far as the story is concerned, and the Wrath it's thorn in my side, because I believe really or clearly explained to the audience why Khan was angry in the first place, and that comes down to Kirk. I truly believe that Kirk should have answered because it was a crime.
Well, you'd have to go back and watch Space Seed from the original series. That's where Khan first appeared.
Yeah,
because
well, here's here's the thing. The reason
in combination, Kirk is a criminal for what he did.
Well, no, I'd have to disagree with you on that. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm afraid.
I did say
forgot
that
about
Khan,
which is not very nice, but he forgot about Khan, which isn't very nice. But he kind of sentenced him to
forget. The Federation has a law during the Space Seed episode and during one in which any Federation-based colony has to be contacted every 30 years.
Well, they weren't 30 years apart,
at the planet to check on them. Well, that doesn't matter. Kirk left
only 15
Khan
years
there on
after
the planet
Space
with
Seed.
no communication device.
They were also wasn't a Federation colony.
Well, Kathy, here's the thing. They actually did a comic book that was a sort of a prequel to Wrath of Khan, and as far as I know, it is canonized. That deals with the aftermath of Kirk leaving Khan and the rest of the crew of the Botany Bay. They do leave them with a good deal of supplies and technical support. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is when SETI Alpha 6 explodes, a lot of it throws the orbit of the planet they're on out of sequence, sync. And unfortunately, it also destroys a lot of their technical infrastructure that Kirk did leave with them, because Kirk didn't leave them behind. He didn't leave them unprepared and everything. They didn't leave them just with the clothes on their back and what was in the cargo containers from the Botany Bay. What ends up happening, if you remember at the
point
end,
about the story with movie, is that they didn't make that clear in the movie that Kirk had left them all of this. It definitely wasn't made clear, but that was previous and an earlier episode. So, but I mean, that's
I
I
did
mean,
a
my point was is it wasn't made clear as to why Khan was so
Well, and
angry about
well,
his wife. It wasn't just about
well, actually,
his. It was more than that. That was just that plus one plus two plus three. It all
well,
stacks.
the well, and the other issue was, if you remember the woman that had fallen in love with Khan in Space Seed, that was his wife.
MacGyver's, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
MacGyver's. They get married, and what ends up happening to MacGyver's is those little reptilian creatures or anything implant
Yeah,
one of
those
their
weird.
young into her. Yeah, those. Yeah, and it ends up killing her. But what ends up happening throughout the course of the comic is you slowly start to see Khan descending into this madness, but he's still holding out for this shred of hope that Kirk will eventually come back and will return to Ceti Alpha 5 and rescue them or whatever. And by the time we get to the events of Wrath of Khan, this is not the relatively normal, rationally thinking Khan that we met in Spacey. This is a very unhinged, a very angry, a very desperate, in a manner of speaking, Khan Noonien Singh that we meet. And he is obviously grieving the death of his wife. He's grieving the death of all the people that were with him there on the planet that had come with him. Because I think this is explained a little bit better. Unfortunately, this is somewhat of a weakness. I mean, this Wrath of Khan does have a few deficiencies and everything. I won't say it doesn't, but within the movie itself and within Spacey, you get a good idea of who Khan was, and you get an idea of the situation that they were placed in. But what you get with this extra material is you get a much deeper dissection of Khan's mental state and what he is dealing with there, because everybody's looking to him to lead them, which he obviously has the capability of doing. But here's the other problem. There was another faction of superhumans and everything that split off. It was a splinter group and everything that went off and tried to do their own thing. But when they realized that they couldn't make it on their own, especially after the catastrophe and everything that altered the environment there on Ceti Alpha 5 or 6, Ceti Alpha, whichever, the other band and everything starts coming back and starts raiding Khan and his bunch. And unfortunately, what you end up happening is Khan has to go to war with his own people, and that drives him even drives
Okay, I
him
didn't
further
know any
insane
about
because
it. I didn't know any. So you're saying that there's a comic that explains all this. Did this comic or after a movie?
it came out, I think, in either the late '90s or the early 2000s. I can't.
Okay,
Yeah.
so basically,
I was
the
just
Wrath of Khan
gonna.
movie didn't really had to release to fill in the blanks.
Well,
That
actually, it
guys,
did.
when that happens, it's a lame movie.
No, you're probably looking for more information than what's required, but there's an entire scene between Terrell and Chekhov in the Botany Bay wreckage where Khan explains everything. He explains to him that, oh, Chekhov didn't tell you that I was on Kirk's ship and that he left us here to make our own life, and then he never checked into us, and then Ceti Alpha 6 exploded, and then we had to survive. Like, that's all the exposition you need for a revenge plot. And
Yeah,
if you
for
want more,
revenge, you want to
have
keep it
more,
simple.
but it definitely creates a clear goal and motivation for Khan, and that's all you need is a clear goal and motivation. His clear goal is revenge, and that he's motivated by that because of the death of his wife and the fact that his life has been a lot more harder than he was hoping it would to be when he first landed on this planet.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I did a recap of Space Seed a couple weeks ago, and it really dives into why Khan felt the way he did in Wrath of Khan because of the events in Space Seed. And there might be that comic. I've never even heard of that comic. I'm gonna have to look into it. But
You
and then
probably-
there's the Eugenics Wars books, which aren't canon, but it does explain everything that I think Kathy is looking for with all that background information.
Yeah, because I think wasn't it two or three book series that dealt with the eugenics wars.
Yep, and it dealt with the time on Earth before Space Seed. It dealt with when after Kirk left him on the planet, what happened, how Marla died, what everything that happened after SETI Alpha 6 exploded, and then into the events that lead right into, and then the hardship of living on that planet after that exploded until right up until the events of Wrath of Khan. I mean, I know it's not canon, but I think that series would give her the background, I think, for what she's looking for.
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessary to the whole rhythm of the story of the movie itself, but it does present a very good character examination of Khan Noonien and Singh. And that's, I think, is something that is not a bad thing, because Khan, while he is a villain, he is a very complex and interesting villain. And as the old saying goes, sometimes it's more fun to be the villain than the hero.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes, well, I mean, heck, if you look at, and I don't want to get off on a big tangent here because I want to try and keep this fairly streamlined. If you look at the great villains of cinema within the last 20 years or so, you would very easily put Khan Noonien Singh and very easily put Darth Vader in the same list. Just depends on where you want to put them in the list, because they are so complex. They are so intriguing. And Katie, I hope you don't think we're ganging up on you here or picking on you or anything. We're just trying to help you.
No.
Okay.
I'm just
Okay.
I'm just coming from a different angle. That's
And
all.
that's
There's nothing wrong.
and that's
with it.
okay. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a different angle, a different perspective on this. This is why we're here, to explore the different angles of this. So,
Yeah.
But
I mean, I always to counterpoint what you were saying, there's not really much difference between a hero and a villain in my perspective, because even villains are doing things for reasons, the Dr. Horrible thing, I'm going to rule the world because I'm going to make it a better place. Well, that's not exactly
movie.
what you would call evil. I mean, it's the means to the end is what defines villainy, heroism. But even with heroes, you're going to crack some eggs. So, I mean, where does the hero and the villain fall? Spectrum is right and what is wrong. If it's wrong to take even one human life in the pursuit of something that's good intention, well, then all your heroes that have ever been written about are going to be evil villains, because at some point they have performed an action that has led to the direct or indirect death of another human being, thus making them villains. And it's kind of like the Loki question. I only murdered 83 people. Thanos murdered half the universe. Who's the villain?
they both are. If you want to look at it very black and white, they're both villains.
Can be.
So
It depends on what your threshold is for a villain to a hero. I mean, a hero that kills is technically considered an anti-hero, and especially if they as long as the motivation for the killing is not out of a desire, but out of a repercussion or out of a defense, or out of it's a choice. I mean, a hero has to make a difficult choice given the options presented to them, and ideally they make the more virtuous one. A villain makes the choice that serves themselves above others. And in Star Trek, there aren't really villains; they're just antagonists. Like Khan isn't a villain. He doesn't want to take over the galaxy. He doesn't want to rule the Federation. He just wants to have his own little society on its own to do with what he wants. Kirk's not even trying to stop him in that regard, especially in the Wrath of Khan. Kirk is only trying to, like, save the mother of his child when she called for help, and then save his crew, which is a trainee crew, against Khan's revenge against him. And the brilliance of the Wrath of Khan is that neither Kirk nor Khan are actually side by side in each other. They're a ship. They're on two separate ships. They're never physically in the same room. It's all a battle of strategy and wits and survival for each of them. And that's what makes this a very interesting story compared to other science fiction or science fantasy tales, where it is a villain who just wants absolute revenge and wants to destroy everything just because of whatever, and versus these two people that have a grudge. Well, one has a harsher grudge on the other, and with Kirk in Wrath of Khan facing his own mortality, not seeing that he has something of an empty life because he decided to take a desk job instead of stay on the bridge of a ship and explore and make the difference that he wants. That's the thing. That's his internal conflict that he's coming to terms. And by the end of the movie, he may have lost his best friend, but he sort of mended wounds with the mother of his son, and he finally got to meet and get to know his son. So he had a future, and he felt young, as if he was exploring something new again. And that's the core of that character's arc in that film.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Spock says it perfectly.
On that note, I'll definitely agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Spock says it so perfectly to Kirk and everything. In the corridor there, I think it's Starfleet. No, it was in their quarters there on the Enterprise. Spock's quarters. My correct me. Spock says to him, "It was a mistake for you to take promotion. To command a starship is your first and best destiny. Anything else is a waste of material."
So glad I'm not the only one that can quote that movie almost verbatim.
Speaker, one thing you'll learn about me is I am a font of useful and useless information.
I do that to my kids all the time, and now they've started doing it back to me. So I'm just like, it's just funny to hear somebody else doing that. So,
and I just want to take a quick minute to say hi to everybody in the chat. Jeff B, thank you for being here, sir. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Adega, obviously, he's in the chat. Let's see, who else? Oh, goodness. Speaker, you were speaking a lot. So are you, Kathy. Classic Comics, my newest moderator. Greetings, MacGyver. Good to see you, sir. Glad you are here as well. I think that's and Jane Theory was here a little while ago. Jane, if you're still in the chat, thank you for being here. Gray Order or Gray Council, thank you for coming as well. If you all hear this in the replay, but I think we're going to transition off of Wrath of Khan to Search for Spock, unless somebody else has some additional thoughts. If you do, here's your open. On Wrath of Khan.
On to Spock.
I'm good.
So this is my favorite Star Trek film. So I mean, where do you guys see this one? Is it like in the ranks?
We'll go around the horn. Script.
This is definitely one of my favorites because it's a very simple story with great complex characters, great revelations, and it has a lot of heart to it. So that's one of my favorites.
Sci-fi?
I'd say it's in my top two. I mean, I have a hard time putting lists together, especially for franchises, especially Trek, that I've been so invested in personally as a child with. I just, there's so many great aspects about all the films, even Star Trek V. I mean, for me, even in that film, the character interactions are just priceless.
Yes, absolutely.
So I have a hard time making lists, but it's definitely in my top two.
Okay. Kathy, what about you?
I have to say that of the original movies, Search for Spock is always going to be number one, and that's mom. Grew up thinking said she had a huge crush on Leonard Nimoy, and any Star Trek episode or any Star Trek Spock centric it was there. We were watching it, and she was all up me all about how it was when she was a kid, and so I got to see her enthusiasm. This was something special when we were growing up because my mom was not very enthusiastic about it. And so it was this is the nerd, the geek, and the enthusiasm that I was exposed to as a child, and I grew up with that, and it carried into TNG for me. And so as a second generation person, especially for Spock, or it's always going to be important to me because it's the most personal. That's my answer.
It's the ears. It's something about his ears that drives women crazy. In fact, I think they did a documentary on that, why Spock became so popular, and it was mainly like the women. The women were just like, that is so hot.
I think they just figure he would listen better than other men.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Spock is the reason why I had a crush on Legolas growing up.
I mean, heck, even Dax couldn't tell Benjamin why she liked him.
Yeah. That was a great episode of Deep Space Nine, that crossover.
Oh yeah, Trial and
I
Tribulation.
know. It was so awesome. Oh.
Just makes me pine for the days when I remember Star Trek being so awesome, you know, no matter what show they were doing. And
then watching Miles try to fix something and shuts down an entire corridor. That classic.
Oh yeah, well Scotty rebuilt that ship in his own crazy way, right?
Wait, don't we call that practical engineering?
I take it said perfectly. Big ears, big heart.
Well, yeah, it's right where the liver should be, right? So.
leave it to the doctor to know the Vulcan's anatomy.
Oh goodness!
You don't have to eat. You don't have to convince a Vulcan to love you through its stomach because they could eat a bowl of termites and it wouldn't bother them. So.
Good quote.
Well, you know, there was that one episode with Nurse Chapel. I wonder if she agreed about him Vulcan anatomy.
Oh, good grief.
Well, she had a thing for Spock, you know, way before that episode. So.
A dark and dangerous place this line of thinking will take us to. Anybody can get that quote, you get a gold star and a cookie. To kind of touch on my favorite Star Trek of the TOS movies, from my list goes like this: 4, then 2, then 6, then 3, 5, and 1. I do not speak of Generations.
That's okay.
Well, that's a crossover movie.
Yeah, true. And technically,
it's kind of like the official passing of the torch, so to speak.
Yeah, but it was a very bad passing of the torch. Somebody dropped it.
I didn't say it was a good passing of the torch.
I know.
The official.
I know. But it wasn't. It was not a good passing of the torch. I think somebody dropped the torch and it landed right on Picard's face, or maybe Worf's.
I love that 2-hour tan he got. He just went from pasty to how long have you been in Florida there, bud?
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, well, I think we've spent enough time on Wrath of Khan. Unless somebody else has another point they want to bring up, and if not, we'll move into Search for Spock.
Well, we have to
Sounds
get
good.
into Search for Spock because Christopher Lloyd. I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Dr. Emmett.
And to think that the Klingons in that movie were written they were supposed to be Romulans, not Klingons.
You're kidding.
Was it no?
I
That
did not know
part
that.
of the Klingons was written for Romulans, and everybody was getting on about how Christopher Lloyd didn't quite act a Klingon. He was working with the script he was given, which was written for characters that were supposed to be Romulan. You know, because he was sneaky, underhanded, this, that, and the third, which of course led
I
us to
never knew
the
that.
TNG Klingons. But
Handed.
Well, yeah, also the cloaking
understand.
technology. That wasn't really a Klingon thing. Oh,
well,
sorry.
Yeah,
actually,
because-
there's a fan theory that says that Klingons got the cloaking technology in the TOS days when with like Balance of Terror, because they gave the Romulans the D7 design. They got cloaking technology in return.
Yeah,
So there was
that's
like
what I heard.
a
Yeah.
brief alliance. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's fan theory though. I mean, it's never technically canon, but that's the accepted
Yeah.
medium for why that happened.
The closest
That's
of the canon is that the Romulans purchased D7s that were used in that the Enterprise incident.
Right.
But we never know what they paid to get them, so it is completely logical and rational to assume that they traded a cloaking device for them. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, and Jeff B. kind of he brings up a good question. Didn't Nimoy direct Star Trek Search for Spock? Yes.
He did.
Yes,
Yes.
he did. He actually has. Does he have 2 directing credits for the original movies? Because he
Yeah.
had
Did
3.
this one and 4.
And 4.
Yeah, he did. He did 3 and 4, if I remember correctly. So Jeff
There-
B, good on you, sir.
They are
You
not
giggle.
the hell your whales.
Not sci-fi, not yet. We'll get to it, but not yet. We'll get there.
Jump in the shark here.
Just a little bit. Well, no, you're not jumping the sharp. You're just jumping ahead, but that's okay. But I know some people consider Star Trek 3 the kind of the weaker of the unintentional trilogy, but I think there's still some good stuff in there to talk about. Particularly, and this might be taking us down a rabbit hole I might regret, but the whole idea of duality of personality in terms of the fact that McCoy not only has his own personality, but he also has Spock's personality roaming around in his head.
I thought that was a very good like exploration of like the Vulcan Katra and the human spirit and how the two would interact with each other, and apparently not that well, which I mean it did, but I mean it almost drove McCoy insane, and especially when they're sitting there on the bridge and stealing the Enterprise, and he answers in Spock's voice. That to me, I was like, whoa. So
I love his response
Well,
when
I
he finds
imagine
out
they not
that
very
green-blooded
high.
Vulcan. It's his revenge for all those arguments he lost.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, he doesn't say that green-blooded Vulcan. He calls him that green-blooded SOB.
Yes.
Is that what he actually says, Speaker?
Yeah, I didn't want
Okay.
to swear on your channel if you weren't ready for that. So
Well, I'm really glad that they set set up and Sir Sarek
Sarek,
later on for the TNT episode, and so I
Yeah.
thought
Wait,
that episode.
yeah.
So the fact
Oh,
that
it was.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the one thing that disappointed me about the Picard and Sarek thing was that we never heard about Kirk's melding with Sarek and why Picard never brought up anything about Kirk, through that mind meld, because he would have felt part of Kirk's presence in there.
Did
Because Sarek had mind melded with Kirk in Star Trek 3.
yeah, he did.
Well, he didn't say mind. Well, okay, it was a mind meld, but it wasn't the same type of mind meld that Sarek did on Picard. Because what Sarek did in that particular mind meld to Picard was to transfer all the dysfunction and everything into his mind and to gain access to the stability and everything that Picard could bring to him. That was a different type of mind meld that Sarek and Picard shared. What Sarek and Kirk did in Star Trek 3 was basically Sarek was probing Kirk's mind to see if Spock had implanted his Katra into.
Like Spock
Kirk's-
did the Valerians in Star Trek 6.
Yeah. It was an investigation mind meld, which is what we usually would be, or at least was established in the series, is what the mind meld was. Because like when Spock did it on the probe, when he's like mind melding with the machine, he's doing it to figure out what its purpose is. He's not actually trying to like exchange anything there. The Sarek and Picard was more like an emotional dump to counteract the Bendai syndrome that Sarek was suffering from. And it did leave residuals into Picard, which he was able to share with Spock at the end of Spock's episodes in TNG, when after Gene Roddenberry had passed away. So like the whole mind meld stuff is like it's a crazy cool concept of telepathy for the Vulcans. And they really had a lot of fun with it in Search for Spock.
Oh yeah.
When T'Pol got attacked in her mind by that, and the fact that they did, you kind of saw T'Pol she had to learn how to do it. She didn't know how back during the Enterprise years. So that was that was an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, during Enterprise though, they were going on a different form of teachings from I forget his Surak. What happened was they found the true teachings of Surak in the fire caves out in that desert, brought it to the high command, which basically made them look like the liars they were. And then that's when, after the true teachings of Surak came around, is when mind melds were no longer considered taboo and actually a thing that was encouraged through Surak's teachings. So that's why she had a problem with it. And plus the guy that did it wasn't properly trained. That's why she wound up getting that that weird disease from not having it done the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with some of that stuff they did in Enterprise. I don't know if anybody else did.
No, I did too.
I was just like, whoa! You've just changed the Vulcans' history. You know, to me it was a major retcon of their past, and I'm like, it seems like that would have been mentioned at some time in the original series or whatever. I mean, it was okay. I mean, it served its purpose, but I really did struggle with some of what they did in Enterprise. But it was a good show. It's just like
its fourth season was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was.
But I always look at Enterprise as that's the version of that timeline after the First Contact. It's a First Contact timeline.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's not the original, because I know why the Braga and them named the show Enterprise, named the ship Enterprise, is because of brand recognition. But really, like, the first starship of Starfleet should not have been named Enterprise. It could have been named anything else. Because traditionally, before that series, the Enterprise was a freighter, and it did something during, I guess, the Klingon Federation War, and that's why the Constitution was christened the Enterprise, the 1701. Like, that was my understanding of it way back before Enterprise.
Even the first space shuttle
bring up
wasn't
aside talking about mind melding, and the fact that it has been there's a precedence set that the mind meld that Spock had with the now I've forgotten her name, on the planet Spock was the baby. The whole point behind me bringing that up is that Vulcans have an incredible, powerful mind where they can determine what they're melding and what they're not melding. It's very, very focused, and that's the only reason why I brought that up, guys. I didn't mean to go off topic.
No, Kathia, this is the whole point of live streaming: is you get on one point and then you go down a rabbit hole, and then you a rabbit trail, and then you get back on the main trail. You're fine.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can definitely bring it back with Lieutenant Savick, because that she has to perform like a mind meld with along with the Ponfar when Spock starts going through his sort of Vulcan puberty type of thing.
Yeah. Well, and here's a point I wanted to bring up in terms of Star Trek 3. And this is probably just me putting my own spin on it, and that's fine. I find it very interesting that, considering the fact that the Vulcan people, for the most part, are portrayed as a very logical, very analytical species and society, when they arrive on Vulcan with Spock's body, and Sarek is there before the High Priestess and everything on Mount Seleia. And the woman says, Sarek, son of Sokar, why do you come here? And Sarek gives this long speech, and she's like, what you're asking is near impossible, and so at one point in our history, nearly legend. And Sarek says, forgive me, when it comes to my son, my logic fails me. And the fact that the way that Sarek frames how he explains the concept of Spock's living spirit, his soul, is an intriguing one, because religion, by and large, in Star Trek is something that is very, very rarely ever discussed. If it is, it's done very in passing. And this concept that you have an alien species that has a firmer grasp of the concept of a soul, or an immortal soul, as Sarek says to Kirk there in Kirk's quarters on Earth and everything, for me is an interesting one, because it brings up this idea, maybe not so much of a organized religion of any sort, but just the simple fact that they frame this idea that the Vulcans understand that every living being has a soul.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. Yeah, it's quite fascinating for a species dictated by logic to have their own type of mysticism, as it were. And on top of that, they also have something of a monarchy, because Sybok is a child of a Vulcan princess, and you have to wonder, where's the logic in a monarchy with regards to a species like Vulcans. It's quite fascinating. It's why it's why I like that we only have so much actual exposure to the Vulcans throughout the Star Trek franchise, and still is basically just scratching the surface of what is all beyond the society. Like, even in the books where they try to explore it in more detail, it doesn't really quite. It gives you a lot, but doesn't really quite give you the same intimate picture that we would hope. And I like that it's at an arm's reach to a point, because it does open up doors for more creativity if it's kept in true to the established stuff that DC Fontana brought to it. And I won't get onto the stuff that Discovery brought in, which doesn't quite make sense for me. But but the fact that it's like this very logical society, big on science and whatnot, and yet its entire planet seems very ritualistic in fashion and in structure and locations and landmarks, as it were. I love it. It's a great great presentation of an alien species that is not on the extreme as we're used to, like prior to Star Trek, where you had basically like giant ants and like beasts with like massive heads or what have you. And what we get now, where you get like squid creatures and whatnot. So I really liked that approach and that little balance between the logic and the faith.
I do too. We're given just enough about them that we can, appreciate who they are and why they're that way, but it still leaves so many unanswered questions, that adds to the mythos of the Vulcan people and their society. And saying that they don't have emotions, they do have emotions. Their emotions almost ruined them as a civilization in ancient times, and that's
Yeah.
why they founded logic. They have emotions, they just suppress them so they don't wind up being like the Romulans, who are an offshoot of the Vulcans,
Yep.
which probably left at the time of Surak, around that time would be my guess, because they were talking about
Oh,
the
wow.
civil wars
Wow.
and the ruin of their civilization, and
Yeah, the
it's just
charge of the raptor or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, it's really fascinating when you take all these little tidbits and you put them together, and then it's just like it's wow, they did a great job crafting that species.
Well, and not only
I
that,
think
in
I,
TNG,
I
you go ahead, Kathy. It's okay.
there
I'll
was
get
a
to my point in a minute.
oh,
No, no.
well, I was
Go ahead.
going to agree with the script doctor. It is Vulcans. The Vulcanating, but it's not that a culture would have a deep this anchor point just about religion. It's about history, and they need to have that
Mm-hmm.
anchorage, logic and science, and looking forward into the future. And but there's no there. What you asked, and I think that's we even glorify our own packing for that connectivity, that belongingness, and those roots that help anchor us so that we can logically. Um, so, and
Mm-hmm.
as far as I think that the reason why the Romulans don't have a really hard base of that is because their marshal is marshal. So they or reason what they have is basically nationalism. It's all about Romulus. It's
Well, that'd be a globalism, but yeah.
well, globalism. But I think that the Vulcan and Romulus is a counterpoint, because for Vulcan, it's not about Vulcan, and it's actually not about Vulcans. It's about the progression science. It's the progression into logic, and so it's not necessarily as the Romulan Empire is very strict, and
Oh yeah.
and,
Well, on top of that, one thing that sets the Vulcans even further apart is the fact that their mysticism is technically tangible. Like the things they do with the mind melds and the discipline and everything that is around the faith of their logical followings is something that can be enacted. Like they have they can share katras from one person to the other and essentially grant themselves immortality. Humanity can't do that, and even though we do have stories in our own religious background of that case, like with the story of Lazarus and the eternal soul and whatnot, it's not something we can actually tangibly access comparatively to the Vulcan society. And I think that's what allows them to embrace it.
memory.
That's one option too. I mean,
Yeah, that is a possibility. The point I was going to bring up in TNG, you have that. I think it's a two or well, most of theirs are two-parters, where Picard is actually goes on board that renegade pirate or mercenary ship where they're going off and searching for that Vulcan device that was basically a weapon. It was a mental or telepathic amplifier that could basically amplify the mental capacities and weaponize them of Vulcans. And you get a very concrete idea of just how for lack of a better word, barbaric or blood or cutthroat the Vulcan society was in their past. Because that was a very horrific weapon that they eventually did get all the parts to and briefly did have an operation, you see what it can do to a person.
Yeah, it's reflective on the target's emotions. So if you have violent emotion, you will be struck with violence, and if you don't, you're fine. And that was the only way to defeat the Vulcan spy posing as, the Romulan spy posing as a Vulcan who wanted that weapon. And the fact that it was pointed at Worf and he didn't do anything, I'm like, oh, that's good.
And unless I'm wrong, didn't Robin Curtis play that Romulan person?
Yeah, she did. I was just about to say that.
Yeah, I thought she did. Because I think that was one time she popped up in TNG. She might have popped up another time, I don't know. But I think the key thing about Search for Spock, amongst others, is the repercussions of the Genesis project. Because, well, yeah, they're off on this side. They're off on this main mission, trying to get Spock's. We'll get McCoy and Spock back to Vulcan to reunite Spock's Katra to his body. You've got Savick and David there on the Genesis planet, and you find out that David and his mother, and I think the other scientists, took a shortcut trying to get the Genesis project to work. Because don't they use like something called
protomatter
in the Genesis device? And in a manner of speaking, that's almost an allegory for maybe not. Well, yeah, I think allegory is okay for the Frankenstein story, because unfortunately that planet ends up killing David. In a manner of speaking, yes, it's the Klingons that carry out the act of killing David,
but it's the Klingons that are interested in the Genesis weapon, which is what David helped create. So precisely,
yeah, and it's also a good allegory of science gone amok. Oh, sci-fi. Yeah, thanks, sci-fi. I couldn't remember that two-parter. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I was going to say, one of the things I really found interesting that struck me was how Kirk came to feel about his son during Star Trek II that carried into Star Trek III. And then we see his reaction when he's killed down on the planet. And he wasn't able to be there to protect him or come up with some plan to where David didn't get killed. And then we see in parts of that come back in Star Trek VI, which I thought was a great carryover and a great character development for Kirk, especially being in his later years.
Yeah. Because while they don't have a whole lot of screen time together in either 2 or 3, you get the idea that there's a lot of regret on Kirk's end of things in terms of how he dealt with his relationship between himself and Carol and his relationship with David. And you see it on Kirk's face when they're sitting there. I'm kind of backtracking a little bit to Star Trek 2, when they're sitting there on the regular one, the moon and everything in the underground. And he's like, "You show me a son. And you show me a son that'd be more than happy to. It seems like be more happy to help Khan kill me." But then at the end and everything, it seems a little awkward. But you realize that Kirk has come to embrace his son in his own way, however dimension or depth you want to give to it. He does have feeling for him. He does love him. To what extent, we don't know for sure, but we get this idea. I think a good way of interpreting Kirk's reaction to David being killed by the Klingons is he does hold some blame personally for himself for not being able to figure out a way to get David out of that situation. Well, not just David, but David and Savick and Spock. but he realizes that he has been robbed of being able to develop and build a relationship with his son by the Klingons. And there's a lot of resentment and a lot of hate there. And I would say it's perfectly justified. But if y'all have a different interpretation, I am by all means ears.
No, I love that aspect. I like the fact that once he gets what he kind of always wanted at the end of Wrath of Khan, which is a chance of a legacy, a chance of a family, a new adventure for him to go on, which is like fatherhood. Even though it wouldn't be as much of Kirk raising David because he's already an adult, but it's like getting to know him and creating a relationship, and then to have that taken away so soon after he just managed to do this, because like he agreed to Carol's wish, which is like to not be a part of his life. We know based on what David says about how his mother used to hang around with that Boy Scout Kirk, that he saw him as a child at least a couple of times, but there's just no connection to from David's perspective that man was his father. And when that revelation comes to pass at the end, where Kirk is still treating him just like respectfully, like Carol's son, just respect, like, hey, I poured you a drink, do you want it? I'm just gonna try and be at distance. And then when David says, no, I'm really proud of you, and I'm proud to be your son. And then they embrace, and you're like, oh my God, like that's, Kirk is getting something new in his life that he never had, and maybe didn't even know if he fully wanted or not, and he's willing to explore it. And then when he hears from Saavik that David has died, he's literally speechless. He can only say that one line over and over again. And
You Klingon sons of bitches, you killed my son.
Klingon bastards, yeah.
Oh, Klingon bastards, okay.
And and he's like he's struggling to stay on his 2 feet because of what the responsibility he still has in the situation, but he can't do it. He's literally lost a part of himself. And and the fact that it's not overplayed, especially by William Shatner, is also something smart on Leonard Nimoy's part, and also carried over from Nicholas Meyer's interpretation. And then the fact that he's like, I have to grieve later because I still have this thing to do. And you only get that one brief moment at the end where Kirk takes his jacket and puts it over David's chest and head, saying, goodbye, and then getting off the planet with Spock right before it explodes. And it's just like, goodbye, David. That's what he says. And you feel a lot in that performance.
Well, Speaker, you've been quiet for a couple of minutes. Got anything you want to say?
Sorry, I had my kids come in and they were just like they just washed my my dog, and they were trying to put him in his kennels.
So that's okay.
I'm off trying to round kids up, so I apologize for that.
No, it's okay. It's all right.
I love the character building that happens in the third movie is just fascinating, because you get a glimpse into their lives that we don't usually see. That we get that more personal side of them. And I mean, from Spock's perspective, from Kirk's perspective, I mean, all of them, it's just, you get a real deep insight into who they are and what makes them who they are. And I love that about this. And I mean, and the interactions between Krug, Christopher Lloyd's character, I mean, he was just awesome in this. And I was trying to think of his name, but he plays one of the Klingon characters. He used to be on
John Larroquette.
Yeah, John Larroquette. Thank you. He was awesome in this. He doesn't have a big part, but it blew me away when I first realized that's who that was. I'm sitting there, that's the guy from Night Court, all the years ago. Yep. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Daniel Fielding.
So I mean, it was fun to see, to realize those little things. But
Brent Spiner was on Night Court too, so
yeah,
he was. That was a great.
He played that one dirt,
the like redneck guy.
Yeah,
the Wheelers. He played one of the Wheelers.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was just this, and a lot of people don't like this particular film as much, but I mean, it really does. It pulls you in and gives you that aspect to their characters that, I don't know. I love all the films, the originals and stuff, but but especially the battles and stuff, because you see Kirk also once again in a losing situation and turns it into a win. I mean, it's like, and that's just what he does.
I have had enough of you.
You know, and it's funny because I knew William Shatner was a great actor, but until I started seeing him in stuff like Boston Legal and other stuff, I'm like, I didn't realize how versatile he actually is and how funny he really is.
Oh yes.
TJ
So-
Hooker is something you got to check out. Man.
Yeah, I mean, and I
First
remember
four
back
seasons are
in the
phenomenal.
day.
Rescue 911.
Yeah, Rescue.
Well, that wasn't so much comedic. It was just hammy as all get out. This episode on Rescue 911.
he was playing into the overacting stereotype.
He was, but
Yeah,
you know what? He
I
owned
think he
it.
was trying to channel
I
his
think I
Robert
liked him
Stack,
better on
and
Third
it didn't
Rock.
quite happen.
What'd you say, Kathia?
I said I think I liked him better at Rock.
Oh, it's
Oh,
the big
actually-
giant head.
I forgot he was in that. Oh my god!
I didn't even know he was in that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's the big
didn't
giant
either.
Yeah,
head.
he was the big head.
Oh my goodness. Well, we'll take a few minutes. We need to address the elephant in the room, and that being Mr. Christopher Lloyd as Commander Krug.
I thought he did a pretty darn good job at it.
Yeah.
Personally.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. He wasn't too over the top, and he was still menacing as a Klingon, but at the same time, you're thinking, that's Doc Brown playing a Klingon.
Yeah.
Well, it's better to think Doc Brown playing a Klingon than his character from Taxi playing a Klingon. 'Cause-
You are just a yeah. Yeah, I forgot he was on Taxi because I've actually seen a few episodes of
Bringing back some memories now.
man.
That's
He was the one that made Danny DeVito come ask box for the first. Remember my parents howling at the TV because of this little Danny DeVito and then this big for Lloyd. Oh, it was hilarious. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
It was funny.
No.
now I'm just imagining that entire crew with the Taxi cast with like Judd Hirsch, Christopher Lloyd, like Danny DeVito as one of the Klingons, and Tony Danza there at like the helm. And then you got like
Danny DeVito
Andy
be better
Kaufman as
as
Latka as the Klingon that's
Ferengi.
not speaking.
I want to know who's the one that gets shot for blowing up the Grissom, though. It's like, oh, whoops.
That's probably Latka.
yeah.
Here's the thing. We
Probably
think
Andy Kaufman.
who has the higher body count? No, hold on. Let me finish, Kathia. Let me finish. Who has the higher body count? Krug or Vader?
Probably Krug because he can't keep a decent weapons officer for the life of him.
Yeah, I mean, Krug did lead the death of everyone on his crew except for like one guy. Vader, we saw strangle two people in Empire
At least
If
two
not
admirals.
more.
to death, like for sure that I know of.
He
Yeah.
kills the captain in in New Hope as well. He chokes him out. Or chokes
I don't
him
think
to
he
death.
died in that. I thought he just choked him out in the briefing
Oh,
room.
no, he was dead.
No, he killed that one. He
The-
broke that one right to death and promoted the guy next to him.
Yeah.
Oh, in Empire, yeah, he
Yeah,
killed
Well,
that
yeah, he
Admiral
did.
You're talking about
Admiral Nita.
if you're talking about Captain Antilles,
Yeah.
you actually hear
His
Antilles.
throat
yes.
collapse. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
yeah. You hear the neck break. Yeah.
Yep, you hear Antilles' neck break.
Right, I forgot about that one for a brief moment because I'm just thinking like
Oh, that's
Empire where he
something-
kills the two of his own crew as opposed to like a third party.
That's true.
But oh man, comedy is where the brain goes to tickle itself.
I could so see
Ricky Gervais was so right.
I could so see Andy Kaufman firing on the Grissom and say, "Oops, sorry."
Sorry
It was a
about
lucky
that.
shot.
It's a lucky shot.
Well,
boss.
I don't know about you guys. That the one thing that would definitely frighten me is an evil Doc Brown. That would really make me pee my pants. I'm sorry.
Ooh, oh man, yeah, Doc Brown, an evil Doc Brown with a fully functioning time machine. Think of the crap he could do.
Yeah, 1985 Doc Brown, worried about 1955 Doc Brown, not so much. He hasn't invented anything good that works in 1955.
It's my job
Wow.
to imagine because I'm a red. Times you got to go to those dark places.
Mm-hmm.
Of Christopher Lloyd is I wouldn't want him in my universe. He would take it over. I often imagine a lot like evil Christopher Lloyd is probably exactly like Rick. So yeah.
Well, Rick and Morty is based off a parody of Doc Brown and Marty McFly. There's original YouTube show that was made called Doc and Marty, and it had time travel and stuff, and it was verbatim that. And Dan Harmon liked it really a lot, and they managed to work it together to create what now has become Rick and Morty. So yeah, you picked right up on that, Kathia.
Yeah. Well, any closing thoughts on Search for Spock before we move into the final part of the trilogy?
The music in that one is fantastic. I loved how they incorporated the original Alexander Courage theme towards the end.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Well,
Anybody
they
else?
also had an homage to the opening Klingon scene from TMP and parts of when you saw Krug's Bird of Prey coming through, especially like when he was decloaking over that ship to get the Genesis device information.
You're absolutely right. You hit that one.
Oh yeah, those are human pirates. That was one thing that was cool. It's like there are humans out there that are not really members of the Federation doing their own skeevy stuff, which is fun.
Well, on the outskirts of the Federation, it's life isn't the utopia that it is on Earth. Humans are still doing what they have to do to survive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even though they have these awesome Federation ideals, you're out there on the rim. You can't always adhere to that, so you got to do what you got to do to survive. Especially in the TOS era, where there are no replicators and all this other stuff. So you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, because there are Federation colonies, and then there are colonies that have decided to abandon the Federation, and they're doing their own thing. The colony that Tasha Yar came from was one of those.
Yeah, sure was.
So I like that aspect. I like the fact that it's Earth itself has people that want to do their own thing outside of what the society is, whether it's replicated on another planet or create something brand new, and they have that option. And it's a shame that we hadn't really been able to fully explore that in the future series, because that would have been amazing to see another human society that doesn't hold Federation ideals, yet still is, I guess, either successful or within conflict, however you want to do it, on its own way. Because all we got in the original series was human interference, where they repeat the Gestapo on a planet, or they do stuff where it's like the 1950s the Prohibition time.
I really think that's what Andromeda was supposed to script. That's the show that Roddenberry came up point to start points that with Earth actually being not a trash can.
It's not a bad point.
It makes sense because Harper was from Earth, and that's all he talked about was how bad Earth was, and that's why he, escaped and went with Becca to go find fortunes wherever they may.
That show had a lot of
very much,
and I loved James Marsters.
Yeah, it did.
He was brilliant. Sorry, off topic.
No, you're fine, Kathia. Well, if there are any further thoughts, we'll move into our final film for the stream and everything, and that being Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Do do do
Oh, Lordy Lord.
What
And
a
I-
fun movie.
Oh man. If you want to talk about a fish out of water story, go no further than Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
A lot of puns in that. Yes.
Whales are mammals.
Whales are definitely well, it is technically it's a mammal out of water story because it's not just the crew going, back in time, but it's, the humpback
I
whale.
see what you all did there, and I appreciate it. Well done. Well played.
You
Good
should
job.
all be sent to the penitentiary.
No.
Sorry, that's a Big Bang reference. I couldn't help myself. So
That's not a bad reference, speaker. Good job. Good one. Well done.
You are now
I will
banished
say,
to the black.
Is that the same one with that big creepy robot from the black hole that Disney made?
Maximilian.
Yes.
No, that's
Love that movie.
a
But
tabletop game called Nightmare. Don't worry about it. It's obscure.
That's
Okay.
cool with the clock that you have to, that ticking clock on that, right? Is there a clock?
It's a count.
mm,
Yep.
you're asking the wrong person here. When we did our rankings of the Star Trek TOS movies, I listed 4 as number 1, and there's a very specific reason why. Because I love not just the time travel story element of it, but the humor.
Oh God.
yeah.
I loved, and when I finally got to watch it on VHS and everything, I got to hear the unedited version with all the cussing. Even though it was very mild cussing, I'm like,
See, I expected that from Kirk, but when I heard Spock saying it, I lost it.
yeah, I think everybody did. Because
It's like hearing a
Couldn't even
little
say
kid
it
for the first time that doesn't quite know how to do it yet. So
That's the brilliance of it, is that he doesn't quite know how to swear.
and Kirk tells him, maybe you should lay off the colorful metaphor
Yeah.
for a while because you really don't have a knack for how to use them properly.
the hell
Too much
I can't.
LDS.
Too much
Too much LDS. Yeah, there's one.
Disagree. That movie was a couple of jokes does not make a great movie. And had
Well,
it
no,
been released in the last few years, we would have been on Loki's channel complaining about how it was woke.
Oh, it would have been SJW to death.
Yeah.
I still would have loved it. Okay,
But
Nicathia.
that's back when they did it in the right way. If they were
knew
going
how
to
to
put
do
a
movies
political
then, yeah.
message in there, like they
Or-
didn't
well, not
beat
so
you over
much
the
a
head
pol-
with it, you know?
This was not so much a
Universal.
political message, but a social, environmental
Yeah,
message
yeah,
would be
there you
more
go.
accurate. But I get what you're saying,
But it's
Speaker.
also done about like we should be cautious of our actions because they may have dangerous repercussions that we may never experience ourselves, but they could affect our children and their children. Which
Yeah,
is it's a universal message. It's one that's been repeated throughout myths all the time. It's like the sins of the father. That's basically the theme.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, yeah.
And
One of my favorite.
Of Doctor Who in 55.
Oh no!
I've not seen Doctor Who since I saw the unedited part of Capaldi's introduction, and there was this speech by the companion where it just started with like a "How dare you" thing and just was a monologue, and I'm like was completely turned off by that because number one, anyone who opens up defends themselves with a "How dare you" is basically admitting that they're you caught them. So like already I wasn't liking the character so much to begin with from the last few seasons with Matt Smith, but now I just despised her and I was like, as much as I love Capaldi, I cannot stand this character anymore. So I just bowed out, and thankfully I did because apparently Capaldi wasn't written that well for his Doctor, and then what's happening now with Chibnall and all of his craziness. I'm glad I'm not stressing out over that.
I'm not really that big of a Whovian, but one of my favorite scenes in Star Trek 4 is where Chekhov walks up to that motorcycle cop, and he's asking about the nuclear vessels in Alameda.
During Cold War, United States.
And one thing I learned was that was like kind of like half unscripted. That cop wasn't even written into that scene. They just told Chekhov, "Hey, walk up to this cop and start asking him about nuclear vessels."
And they
And
told
he
the cop,
did.
"Don't
That was
say
like all
anything."
off the cuff stuff, and the cop's just sitting there like,
Yeah,
"What?"
Nimoy said,
What?
to the cop,
What
"Don't
is
say a
happening to
thing."
me?
Don't say it.
And Katie, I'm not saying that it's just solely the humor that makes Star Trek 4 such a good movie. The message of it and everything is a powerful one, is a good one. But you so rarely see that type of tongue-in-cheek humor in Star Trek, or at least I hadn't up until this movie. That it resonated so strongly with me as a teenager that I was like, "Holy crap! Captain Kirk just cussed. This is awesome."
And his double dumbass cuss was
Double
sick.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Oh man!
No, there are a lot of brilliant things. I especially like the hospital scene when they go in with Jillian and then they come out and the cop's like, how's the patient? He's like, he's gonna make it. It's like, you went in with a woman, and Kirk's response is one little mistake.
mistake.
And it's like, what the heck?
Now, one thing I noticed too, Dr. McCoy gave that lady a pill. She grew a kidney in a matter of minutes. And then we get to TNG and it's like, well, they had pills that grew kidneys. Why can't they, grow these organs from pills from all these people getting injured, like Picard's heart and Worf's spine and just
Maybe we should
little
ask,
details
Dave
like
for
that.
He's a legit doctor. He might know the complex differences between kidneys and hearts to elaborate on that. But yeah, like that's a great point. It's like, how many pills are there that could grow a new kidney?
I just love Dr. McCoy's because it really harkened back to the original series. He's like, "Oh, these people are living in the dark ages. Take this and call me in the morning."
Drilling holes in his head is not the answer, man.
That's right. I mean, it just harkens back to the
examination.
great character that he's always been. So
Yes. Well,
And he's right too, because we are still in the very early stages of medicine. We know more about the galaxy and the universe than we do about the human body.
yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, you could say there's a correlation there because the more we get into space, eventually we'll come across somebody smarter than us. We can hope.
Yeah.
And hopefully they won't
Maybe
look
we
at us
should
as some.
stick to exploring our oceans then.
Then we'll get a Dr. Phlox with these leeches and other stuff teaching us the right way to do medicine.
That's the whole different levels of civilization. There's like level 0, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And I think we're barely a level 1. I mean, so if you meet a smarter species, they might look at us like we look at ants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, get away from our food.
We'll have a long way to go on that mark.
Oh yes. I mean, for heaven's sakes, doesn't the TOS movies take place in the 23rd century or 22nd? 23rd. 23rd, yeah, yep. 23rd. And we get crippled by a giant whale probe.
Which signal is so loud it pretty much impedes all
it
energy flow.
ionizes the oceans. It shuts down all power. It's just a giant EMP, basically, and except for the fact that the stuff comes back on after it leaves. But
it's a suppressor, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought y'all might throw a pun in there, being as I said giant whale probe.
You mean a dork? That would be the technical term, I think. If a whale man, it's a dork.
I'm sorry. It's late. I've had a long weekend. I need to. My brain went there. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. Yay, back on topic. I honestly, I know that Kirk was seen as kind of as the ladies' man in the TV show, but I think that a good subversion of expectations at the end. I'm not necessarily jumping ahead to the end, but at the end of the movie where Julian says, "I'll see you around the galaxy," and then as far as we know, her and Kirk never meet ever again.
Yeah, he says,
Well,
To
as
use
I
a
say,
phrase from your century, I don't even have your phone number.
Number. Yeah.
And she's
Well,
like, and that's
she
the way
said-
it's gonna stay.
Yep.
She said, "Don't call me, I'll call
Yeah.
you."
I just want to be friends. The line we all dread.
Well, I mean, yeah, like Kirk only had what, like 3 relationships in the original series that I can recall, and one of them I think he was possessed by an alien being. Him and Dr. Pulaski. Well, she wasn't Dr.
Well,
Pulaski in that episode, but
No, she had a different character, but yeah.
yeah.
Well, I watch TOS and I see him with a different girl every episode.
Oh my!
Yeah.
I remember-
oh
And
my.
he told Bones in the original series. He told Bones in the original series, he says it doesn't matter how long the love or relationship is, it's still love. So these characters we see him with every week, most of them he actually fell in love with. It's just that they wound up either getting killed off or sent on their merry way.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Especially from Say on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah.
The
Oh yeah.
King.
Yeah, where they go back to the 30s.
Yeah. We actually, I had started, I think I mentioned this. I started classes this past week, and I'm taking a class that's on counseling in the pastoral field. And my professor is a huge TOS Trekkie fan. I mean, huge. Worse than me. Well, I'm more Star Wars, he's more Star Trek. And he had us watch that episode, and he's like, okay, how do you deal with what happens to Kirk in response to how Joan Collins' character when she dies?
Let's start with listening.
Yes. But anyway, getting back on topic. I
They
also
get on a
love
big bottle of Aldebaran whiskey and say, "Tell me your problems."
Yes.
Yep.
There's things that a man will tell his bartender that he'll never
Won't
tell his doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say this about Voyage Home. Everybody has their own moments, except for I think really her has her moment and everything.
Well, she has a great moment in Search for Spock, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She does.
She had a really good one in Star Trek V.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
does.
Yes.
Hello, boys.
Yeah. Oh man.
The pun of the captive audience.
Roll card.
Where did they get those feathers, though? That's what.
Yeah.
I don't want to know. I don't want to
That's a
know.
girl's secret. You are not. We're not cleared for that information. Was that what it is?
I don't have clearance. Okay.
Yeah.
And I just want to say real quick, Classic Comics, that's fine. Thank you for being here. Thank you for moderating tonight. I very much appreciate it. You did a great job. Classic, if you have a chance before you pop out, if you can put a link to everybody's channel that's in the stream and everything, do so, and then thank you again. So, but getting back on track. The one thing I think the one thing that need more.
Adega's got some really funny things he's saying in the
He
chat.
does. Yes, he does. And I'm having because I'm laughing so hard. I'm forgetting to.
Adega is
Sure.
a really great guy. I've had a chance to interview him on my channel and talk with them on several occasions. He's a really great guy.
When he put his whale probe comment, he said whale probe. All I could hear was what's the two cartoon kids,
Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead. Yeah,
He said whale probe.
yeah.
Oh, good grief!
Curtis
Sorry, I didn't mean to take it down that direction. I keep
No.
looking at that comment
No,
and just
speaker,
laughing.
speaker.
So
Speaker,
that's
you're
when-
good, man.
That's
You're
when
good.
MTV was worth watching.
Yes.
No kidding.
Yep.
right?
Yeah, but
lies.
no, we do not speak lies. We speak truth. I'm going to say it. That is not lies. We speak truth to power. Ha! Take that, all you SJWs. and spit in your little wimpy pipe and smoke it.
Actually, that's what progressives say, because progressives really don't like the tinfoil hat left. We really don't.
Prefer to
Whatever.
mix
They
mine
give the left a
with,
really bad
with
name.
Shire Leaf.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, JP, you're a mess. Oh, good grief.
If you're gonna smoke Shire Leaf,
Well, and there's a reason why my channel is not for children. Well, I've made it crystal clear to YouTube. My channel is not for children. It's for adults who can think and think clearly.
And critically.
Yes, that too. Where's my layers? I don't know. Where are your layers? Go get your own layers, Adega. That's on you, man.
I'm like an onion. I've got layers.
You should have been thinking about that night before last when we got that almost foot of snow.
Oh, we got that here. Oh boy.
Oh, good.
Now, Dega's in the same state as I am, so.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. I will say one thing. I'll say another thing about Voyage Home. I like the fact that this is kind of a more of a mission-oriented story where everybody had their own part that they had to do, and it tied into their own abilities and what have you. I thought that honestly was a great way of building additional layers onto Hasi. What I did there, Adega. Building additional layers onto the characters from the crew. But what?
Yeah, they each had their own accomplishments. The most amazing one is Sulu getting that helicopter.
I know, right?
I don't know how the hell he pulled that off.
We don't know.
The best part about that is when he turned on the wipers, just that look on his face.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Okay.
But like
okay.
everybody else,
greatest
you saw how they logically got their stuff, and it's like Scotty and McCoy going to the PlexiCore tour and trading off
Oh
the.
man!
Actually, there was a brief scene where Sulu was talking to a guy, and
Yeah.
He
that
was
had
talking to the pilot.
helicopter. Yeah,
And it's
I
like,
don't know
well-
what he bribed him with, but
Yeah,
It was
it's
actually
another
something
Sulu.
called-
Oh my! Like,
It was the one I had that he had typed in earlier. He gives them the formula for something called transparent aluminum.
no, that was
that's
Scotty.
for Scotty and
Yeah, I
McCoy.
know. I'm not. Oh, you're talking.
We're talking about Sulu. He meets the pilot, the Huey
Sulu.
pilot, and you're like, well, okay, so he meets him, and they're just good enough friends to borrow the helicopter.
Because all he says is, "Let me ask you a couple questions," and then it cuts away, and you're like, "Boy, what
And
the
he's
hell
in
did
the
he
air
ask
flying.
him?"
Yeah.
I hope it isn't taken out of hand and everything. We know of George Takei's persuasion. So who knows? Maybe that pilot was of the same persuasion.
Well, technically, Sulu was a father because we know that from generations. So
And
Good
George
point.
Takei has said that Sulu's character, at least his version of it, was not
Homosexual.
Yeah, he was kind of upset about that, which I thought was cool. I'm like, he didn't want him to change the character to a gay character just because that's what he was. He's like, I wasn't playing that part.
Not only that, he felt it was like pandering to who he was really, as opposed to what he was trying to do. And
Yeah.
actors don't like that.
Mm-mm.
Dega, quit it.
that's definitely.
What's San Fran?
Well, if you ask George, he'll answer your question on Facebook. He sometimes he answers back, and that's exactly what happened. He did not like the fact that they changed Sulu in what was it? Was it
Star Trek
into
Beyond.
darkness, or was it?
I
Yeah,
believe
it was
Star Trek
beyond. It was beyond.
Yeah, like that at all. And he said the one
they
thing
didn't.
that I did not want to
They
leave with
didn't.
my legacy
Oh yeah, they did.
was that. And yeah, they did.
well, that they
And
did it
that's what
because
he said.
they wanted it to
if
be
I'm gonna
woke.
leave a legacy on this, that's not what I wanted to leave behind on something else.
Mm-hmm.
Son of a.
Oh yeah. When they did that, I just kind of was like, okay, I think I'm
I mean,
over this.
They did it subtly. They did it in a normalization way, but it wasn't necessarily needed to be done.
Yeah, we don't need it thrown in our faces like that. It's like, come
It
on,
wasn't
we know
really thrown in the
people
face.
Why not?
do that.
Stupid
But come on.
Hollywood.
It was done very tastefully. But George did go on
It was, yes.
Facebook and he made a statement that said, I don't like this at all. And he made his opinion very, very.
And I cannot say I blame him. Not
Yeah.
one iota. But getting back to
That goes back to being true to the source material too. I mean,
Yeah.
which
Not
they
only that,
seem to be
just-
having a hard time with.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
No
when
pun
they
intended.
ignore it,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Good night, Classic, and thank
Good
you
night,
for
Classic.
all your hard work tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Good night,
much.
Classic.
You were
Classic.
awesome. Yeah, I have 2 moderators. I have Shea Storm Dragon and Classic Comics. Got press ganged by me.
So,
They got Shanghaied.
Yes. And Katie, being press ganged is not a good thing. It's a bad thing.
I'm
Oh,
fine.
good grief.
You're fine. Everybody's fine.
I think
We're not-
she has
Do
a
you
different
mean-
point of view on that.
Do you mean freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional? We all are.
That's why we
Fine.
do
Well,
YouTube.
yes. Yeah.
Fine.
That's
It's
well,
it's an anagram. It's an
Fine, no
anagram,
matter so.
Kathy. Yeah.
I know.
So
I know.
you're
If you-
always
if you-
freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional,
Well, I guess
as we all
you'd have
are.
to watch my new video. You'd have to watch my new video and where I'm coming from on that. Oh, sorry, guys.
Oh, a dang it! No, it's okay. Oh, welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing After Dark. Hey, everybody else has got an After Dark version of this. Why not me too?
It's the spicy
you-
time.
It's
You
not.
gotta hear my After Dark live stream, especially when I have DJ Odyssey on, or I'm on his stream. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I like DJ Odyssey.
Okay.
He's
Oh
got a
my
nice set of costumes, man.
He is a resident
Okay.
furry DJ.
Okay, let's.
Well, I appreciate a man
let's
who can
try-
cosplay.
Okay.
I'll tell him you said that.
Oh my gosh, you all are horrible people.
Hey, I finally got him to agree to wear the unicorn mask, so or outfit, whichever gets sent down to him.
Deadpool will be glad to hear.
C-17.
No, the script doctor guy one better. Now,
Stay
I
on
wa-
theme.
Yeah. Well, okay, and getting back on topic. Let's get back on topic here, people, because we're getting near the end here, so to speak. I will
pun
say
intended.
one. I will kick you all out and finish the stream on my own. I'm kidding.
Bodega, come on.
You made me snap. DJ needs high heels.
He's transvestite. Trans.
Oh, no.
Mania.
Oh, Katie, no, you didn't.
Oy vey.
My face hurts.
I wasn't expecting this to turn to Little Shop of Horrors.
That's not Little Shop of Horrors. That's Rocky Horror
Rocky
Picture
Horror.
Oh, Rocky
Show.
Horror Show. Sorry,
Hang your head in shame, speaker.
thinking one thing, saying something else. Oh, damn it!
Okay, all right. Let's get back. Let us
I'm
try
done.
very, very. Okay, turn over and cook on and finish on the other side.
Not gonna say it. Wouldn't be prudent.
Not gonna say it wouldn't be
Not
prudent
at this juncture.
At this juncture. I have one small minor beef with Star Trek 4 in comparison to Star Trek 3, and that is the layout of the bridge of the Klingon bird of prey.
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I noticed that. It was.
Like,
But see, I
what?
read somewhere, it might have been in a novel or somewhere, but I heard they had basically like the Starfleet captains had, like on Starfleet ships, the bridge modules are interchangeable. You just, unbolt them, pop it out, put a different bridge module in, because of the modular nature of the ships. I heard the Klingon captains, when they attained their own command, could lay out their bridge any way they wanted to out of a few different formats. So my headcanon says that's just the way Krug wanted his laid out. And plus, there were several different classes of birds of prey as well.
But that's not the problem.
It doesn't match
It
up
does-
with number 3. Yeah.
Yeah, they completely
you're
changed
saying
the layout.
It didn't.
They
Okay, it
changed
didn't
the
match
layout.
from 3 to.
Now, granted,
Okay, I got you.
yeah, I'm like, what the heck is this? What they do?
They may have accidentally destroyed the set and decided just to redo it so that it works out with how to get the most coverage and the most characters in a single shot, as opposed to the more intimate version of the bridge with Krug, where it's like a focus on the center seat, and then everybody else is on the outskirts, like in a horseshoe around him.
Not to mention that bridge on Star Trek 3 was not particularly what's the word I'm looking for? Effective?
No.
No, it wasn't very functional at all. No.
Yes, thank you, sci-fi functional. That was the word I'm looking for. But
I did like how each officer had their own little nook and cranny. I did like that aspect of it, because we did see some Starfleet ship bridges that were set up like that, especially on smaller ships. But
for me, the bridge in the fourth one reminds me much more of the bridge from the original motion picture.
yeah,
the layout is very similar to that.
Yeah, where Mark Leonard is doing his thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's just I when I saw that bridge, I'm like, well, they've gone back to a more traditional look instead of what they did in the third one.
yeah.
But still, you'd think they would have some continuity. I mean,
Yeah.
it is the same exact bird of prey.
Yeah.
And if they did destroy the sets, they have a whole movie to go look at and say, oh, that's what it looked like.
Yeah. Of course, Kirk could say, this really isn't working for me, guys. Can you do a redo? And the Vulcans are like, yeah, sure. Give us a week. We'll take care of it.
Well, they
Yeah,
were
make
on
sure you use
Vulcan.
all Klingon technology when you do it. We want to
Yeah.
make it authentic.
Well, they were on Vulcan for a few months trying to fix the ship and also convert the translations, I guess, so that they could operate it.
It did look
Yeah.
like Starfleet monitors on some of the panels with the black with the round circle that actually had the stuff showing through, and because we didn't see that in 3 either. So I think there was some Federation tech put into that bridge.
Well, they're on a Vulcan planet. There should be access to it. Yeah.
Yeah, the argument could be made that the Vulcans had access to Starfleet tech, and they just happened to where they were able to install it on the bird of prey. The what was it? What did they call it? The mutiny.
The Bounty.
The HMS Bounty.
HMS Bounty. Okay, yeah. And the one thing that I really enjoyed about of 4 was the music, particularly that opening shot where they're in downtown San Francisco.
It's very 80s.
Oh,
Yeah.
man,
Like the
it
synthetic
is.
drums or
Oh,
synthetic
yeah.
chimes type of thing,
I
right?
remember that.
Yeah,
Electronica music.
Boombox on the shoulder.
well, but it worked.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Crocodile Dundee, the music and the way it was
Yes, yep.
done. It felt very
Oh,
much
yeah.
similar.
West Coast Crocodile Dundee.
hmm
Yeah.
But my
even-
favorite scene has to be when they're on the bus and the punk rocker's got his music blasting and he reaches over and neck pinches and everybody's reaction on the bus. I think that's my favorite scene
Yes.
in that
Well,
whole
everybody
film.
wishes they could do that when we take public transportation.
They don't even
And
care
if
how
I remember
they're just
correctly-
happy it happened.
Yeah.
if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
that guy was actually on the crew or something. The
He,
guy
he
that
was
played the
actually
punk
one
rock.
of the composers.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy said, "Go nuts with how you want to present yourself for this character," and he did.
And he's like, "Oh man, did he ever?" I'm like, he could put the Kurgan from Highlander to shame with his luck.
Yeah, Clancy Brown would be like, "You know what? You're a cool brother."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll have to review that movie sometime because I love the first Highlander.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh man, that
Yeah.
could
No,
be-
the '80s was
That
a
can
really
be what
good
they
decade
want.
for films.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and that's why I'm using my channel to explore all those movies that people have either forgotten or they need a refresher, and they're like, "Hey, man, thank you."
That's what I'm doing here. Eventually, some classic like '80s, maybe '70s, like sci-fi films that people
Mhm.
forgot about, or just maybe are underrated, or something that popped out for me that people might want to watch. I know those videos aren't going to get a lot of views, but
Oh, you might
it's
be
just something
surprised.
that
People are sci-fi, and here's the thing: and we can go a little detour here. Let's just be perfectly candid here. The Star Wars train has crashed and burned, and it's done.
Oh, it's
The only
like
thing that survived is the Mandalorian caboose.
I keep saying the negativity train derailed a long time ago, and
Yeah, and people are going to start searching for new stuff, and we are the new stuff.
Mhm.
well, we got our foot in on the ground floor, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
See, I'm planning
Yeah.
on doing a review of the '80s Dune with my son because I love that movie.
Oh boy!
I know
Oh.
it wasn't like
Speaker.
shown as such a great
Speaker.
film, but I love that one.
Speaker. Oh man,
Well, I just subscribed to your channel, so I'm going to be looking forward to that.
Speaker. I know you're gonna have your son on there, but if you do it as a stream, or if you want to do a follow up stream on that video, I want in because
Oh, absolutely.
I want in because I've been wanting to I've been wanting to discuss the 84. Was it 84?
I think it was 80.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, 84 was the Fincher one. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to cover that because they got a brand new one coming out this year.
Yeah, I've got that script.
See, and
It's not
I hear
bad.
they're
Dune,
going
yeah.
back to that kind of feel to it as well. They're like he's taken, or I can't remember the name of the director,
Denis
but he's
Villeneuve.
going back to
Villeneuve,
that
Yeah.
feel of the '84. So I that's what made me excited because the miniseries they did a few years ago, I was like, no. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't as good as the
It was a
'84
very
film.
cheap series.
Oh. Yeah, it
it was
was.
very-
Are you talking about the Sci-Fi Channel movies or the miniseries?
Yeah, with James,
mhm.
they did
The
that one,
miniseries,
then they
yeah.
did Children of Doom with James McAvoy.
McAvoy.
After that,
Yep. Yep. I remember those. I actually
Yeah, I
had
didn't
Children of
read
Dune
those
on
either.
DVD.
I'm glad they never redid.
I didn't
the Martian
read Dune.
Chronicles.
I rather
Yeah.
watched it.
Yeah, me too.
So
Kathia,
Sorry,
there's
Casey. I
actually
think I walked on you there.
it's okay. That's all right. I think we're kind of walking all over each other.
I was just going to say, Kathia, there's actually a channel on YouTube that covers Dune. He's actually done, I don't know how many videos on every single of the original Frank Herbert books. The channel is called Ideas of Ice and Fire. Great channel.
Oh, I've
Great
seen
Now,
that
I
one
thought
before.
that
Yeah.
was his channel. So yeah, I'll
He's-
have to check that out. Speaker, as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to
He's
sub
got-
to you too. So if you do, definitely watch. I can't participate. Don't know
Oh.
very much about Dune. I can't. It's just not my thing. But I love watching it and I love experiencing it.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I can watch that movie over and over and over again and just never get tired. I mean, the cast for that film
Oh,
was
man.
fantastic. I'm like,
Yeah.
and everybody talks about the special
that the
effects were
first
subpar,
time
and they were a little bit,
that
but
were
not really.
I
I
American
mean,
audience?
No, they were
I will say
pretty solid.
for the time, the special effects for that were good.
yeah.
I think-
everybody else criticizes for that, and I'm just like, what?
Oh, I think
no.
he did. Do you know what he changed it to?
Huh?
I think I know. He changed it to Quinn. I think Ideas of Ice and Fire or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I'll look it up and I'll post it on my Twitter feed and everything after we're done here.
Oh, cool. I look forward to that because
He's his. Okay, Adega, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. You know what, Adega? You, sir, even though you weren't in the stream very long. You, sir, welcome to the moderator corps.
Uh-oh, Daga's got a hammer. I mean a wrench. What do we do now?
Hey, Adega is a good egg. I like him a lot. He has earned my respect. I say the same of everybody right here too.
I know. I was just teasing him. He's a good dude.
I know.
Oh, I've loved reading his comments in the chat. It's been hilarious.
Oh yeah,
So,
he has got legit good jokes. But getting back on topic, and I think we're gonna be wrapping up here shortly because we're pushing 3 hours, which I'm okay with. This has been a lot of fun. This has been a great stream.
yeah. Oh, this Talking Trek is great. How can it not be, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Xenocide. The 4-hour
Xenos-
version is. Sorry.
Yeah, Xenocide. I have heard of the 4-hour version of the '84 Dune. I've not, but I don't think I've ever actually seen it. And Xenocide, I don't think you are. I think you're new to my stream or my channel. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
yeah,
So-
he's actually my brother, so he helps me quite a bit
Oh.
on my channel, but we have
okay.
a lot in common. So
Quinn's
Okay.
ideas.
I got on there and I'm
Totally
like, hey, you
gonna-
need to come to the Ambassador tonight and watch these live streams. So
Adega found it. Quinn's ideas. Okay. Adega, thank you. Good job.
oh, okay.
And Xenocide, thank you for coming tonight as well. Speaking of special effects, I will say even though this is not an effects-heavy movie with Star Trek 4, the effects were good for
Yeah,
the time. I think they honestly hold up well. Thoughts and ideas and comments.
I think when they do the slingshot around the planet,
Validates
I really
just-
like how they did that.
It was around the sun, actually.
Or the sun, yeah. Sorry, pardon me.
Oh, it's okay.
But yeah, no, it was. I loved how because you get that you hear pieces of dialogue from the future parts of the movie.
Oh, when they first do it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you see all the different visuals, and I really liked how they did that. It was.
They
really,
also, I think, I don't know if it's a homage to the Buck Rogers series, but it looked like one of their heads was floating, and it was encased in that same white buildup of pieces that was in the Buck Rogers opening credits.
It might have been.
there's another great series from the
Oh,
80s.
you know what? I didn't even.
Oh yeah, it
notice
was a movie
until
that got
Sci-Fi
a
said
short
something.
series out of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
But yeah, no,
And of
the
course-
special effects were really good in this. That's my biggest criticism of Hollywood right now, is that they seem to be spending so much time on special effects that the story seems to always suffer.
Well, that's with the
Yeah.
larger films, yeah. With
You
the
know,
larger
it's-
films, yeah. If you find like your mid tier films or you're more closer to the independents, you definitely can get more of the traditional character study out of it. Like
Yeah.
Ex Machina was a slightly smaller film,
Hmm.
good special effects, but it was all about the character.
Yeah,
So like they're out there, but the thing is, it's kind of hard to find when you've got titans like Disney just flooding the market with all their stuff and pretty much like preventing you from being able to remember
Well,
any
Yeah.
of
they
the
think
other options out there.
explosions and whatever else is gonna make a movie. It's not all about space battles and explosions and whatnot. Give us a good story.
yeah,
Yep.
You know, tone down the special effects. We can live with toned down effects as long as we have a good story.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
all about hitting the adrenaline rush in the audience. They think, and this is the thing that I've encountered a lot over the past few years, because everybody who I talk to when I do my pitches and when I get my work, they're always talking about great characters and a really good story. Like that's what the foundation. And then as things get built up towards production and possible like actually getting involved into the stuff, then they start talking about special effects. What's a fun shot? What's a fun scene? There's always actors that want to say some cliche lines that they've always loved from other actors that they never had the opportunity to say before. So that kind of like muddles up some things. And eventually you end up kind of losing the focus that you originally that the people that started this project originally intended, and that happens more often than not. It also usually leads to the collapse of the production, so it never gets made. And if everything else works right, then maybe it will hit theaters and you'll see it, and then you'll probably roll your eyes or cringe or what have you as a result, because it's doing all these things to try and make sure that money keeps coming in to complete the production and distribute it to the audience.
The thing is, if they focused on the stories and the characters more than, the polish, of the, well, not polish. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but like the glitz and glam of all the shiny explosions, like Adega said, then the people will come and the money will be there.
It will be. Oh, absolutely. But like, well, number one is there's no guarantee of that, but we do know it's in better odds because you're spending less money on the production, and so the return will be, if it's successful, you'll get more money back in profit because you won't be spending like $500 million to make the movie and then need to make like 1 to 2 million, $2 billion to pay for it. You'll be spending somewhere between $50 and $100 million, and then that's more feasible for you to pay off. But it gets lost along the way because there are a lot of good people in Hollywood that do care exactly what the fans want, which is good character, great story, something simple but like meaningful and makes us want to come back again and again. But it does get lost in the shuffle as things progress and as other parties get involved. What's really been kind of a bad stigma in Hollywood, and it's Hollywood's own fault, is that in the 90s when they started deconstructing what a hero is, it ended up kind of ruining the inspirational aspect of movies. Like there's a lot of stuff where the endings are either dapper or conflicting or a failure, or the hero is always flawed with either like an alcoholism problem or a drug addiction or they've lost a spouse, or like they're in it's all very unimaginative, bad places, and when they and their arc is kind of minimal where they're still in that bad place, but they're just cool or badass, and the term badass has lost all meaning in Hollywood because it's used so often.
Absolutely.
I think another problem is the studio execs trying to micromanage stuff and just letting the people do the jobs they were hired to do.
Some do, yeah, especially
Too
ones
many
where
too many cooks
money
in the
is
kitchen is what we call that. Too many cooks.
Yeah. There's a big issue, which is they have a limited amount of money, even though Hollywood there's money everywhere, but they're all thinking like, okay, we have to mitigate the expenses with the possibility of the return. So they try to do it in a spreadsheet, which doesn't work. But it's kind of like a crutch to allow them to at least stay in business long enough to make one more film where maybe they'll make some money and where they can actually take another risk on the profit of that other one. They're very much trying to make big movies that will bring in a return so they can make that one experimental film that might work but most likely will fail. And if it fails, it's not going to break them. But if it works, then they're going to reap the rewards. And a prime example of this recently is Joker. It was a cheap movie. Warner Brothers took a shot on it. They were expecting maybe to get like a $200 million box office worldwide. And it just went huge. It crossed $1 billion without China's help. And that is the best example most recently of how Hollywood works, where because they made the Justice League, and they made the Superman and all those other things, and huge expenses, and the money didn't come back, but they made a bunch of other smaller films in between that. They were able to collect some additional funds that were not really didn't have to pay off any of their failures as much, and they managed to take a risk on a very low budget homage to the Scorsese era of 70s films and early 80s films, and stamp a popular character's image onto it and give us a breath of fresh air with story and character. And it reaps the rewards. Not only is it critically loved, it's financially successful.
Didn't we talk about that not too long ago, Ambassador, when we were discussing horror movies? That a lot of the great horror movies out of the early 80s and late 70s, they had like $20 and spare parts from a garbage dump, and then we got Evil Dead. Literally, Hollywood has no excuse for throwing money at something. What I want them to throw at a movie is people with brains. That's what I want. I want people.
Okay.
Well, those are
And
few and far between in Hollywood.
Well, and I'm going to say.
Well, then maybe
Something I
we
wanna
should look
say-
away from Hollywood. I mean, it's
Yeah,
that
maybe.
simple. Us as the fans have a responsibility. I mean, if we really truly have had enough I mean, because this isn't the only channel that's had these types of complaints. There's hundreds of them on YouTube. But we as
Yeah.
fans, we make videos and we complain about reasonable things. Maybe we
Mhm.
should stop looking at Hollywood, just completely stop, and maybe start supporting more of our independent creators, those that don't have the big budgets, the ones that are coming out of the little studios in Atlanta, those guys. I mean, my cousin is one of those guys. He's got one decent, but at least he's trying. And
Well, Bollywood's
Well,
also a good market
okay, that's
too. There's a lot of great Bollywood films.
Well, and this is something I'm going to say. It may not necessarily be a popular position, but it's one that I think is a decent one. If you want to talk about decent character development and decent story that was on seemingly a small budget, you can look at, in particular, the first Hunger Games movie and the first Twilight movie. Those were both,
Oh yeah, why
by and
not?
large,
Yeah,
they
why
were
not
both.
Sorry,
They were based on no. They were both based on novels, both written by women. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And they were very
don't nudge
well.
that, Ambassador. Those movies are very embarrassing. I'm sorry. I have very low opinion. Those movies. I'm sorry, Ambassador.
And Kathy, you are entitled to your opinion. But my point is this: Lionsgate was a fairly small independent studio at the time when they did the first Twilight and they did the first Hunger Games movies, and those were, by and large, fan-funded movies. And
Ambassador,
yeah,
that link I threw in for the YouTube channel Dust, could you throw that into the chat? They do independently made sci-fi shorts, and there's a lot of great stuff on there.
I most certainly can. Give me a second. Be happy to. I know they're not. I know they may not have aged well, but if you want to make an argument for small independent movies that made money and were popular for a while, that's two, and they grew into multi-movie franchises.
Oh yeah, and well, the other advantage they had is that they were an existing IP. So that's the other issue that Hollywood has a struggle with, is that the marketing department makes a lot more decisions than they should be doing, because they'll see an idea that a lot of people will say is great, but they'll look at it and be like, well, I can't market this. And my response to that is your job. Figure it out.
Yeah.
But they don't work that way.
You've got marketing departments sitting there twiddling their thumbs doing nothing seemingly.
Well, they're just doing the bare minimum. They're just doing the bare minimum. Who recognizes
bare minimum,
this?
absolutely, I agree. There was a
They're
small
turning out a
production,
couple of teaser posters.
I caught
Go ahead, Kathy.
I caught independent show on Prime by accident, and I thought it was going to be campy and cheesy, and it is a little bit fantasy, and it's called Journey Quest. As the show progressed, it actually got better and better, and it was basically like the D&D movie, only as a TV show. It follows a group of adventurers, a bard, a warrior. But it progressed, got better and better, and then it was so disappointing. I saw that this small, whoever this production company was, because I can't remember it off the top of my head, I thought they were doing a great job with what they, and it didn't look like that they had a story, the effects that they had, the costumes. I mean, because it was a fantasy, and you've got people running around in armor, and you've got bartender. Great. If you guys want to check, if you guys like fantasy, I offer that as a suggestion. It's called Journey Quest, and yes, it does. It starts out cheesy and campy, but it gets better. That I'm looking for on Amazon and Hulu, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to do my reviews on is I can't sift through all the stuff to find stuff, it of it takes a lot of
It gets buried.
manage through something.
Mm-hmm.
It does get buried, and it's such a shame because the show is a lot like you definitely get the feel of Dr. Horrible in all of that, or the Guild.
Oh, so it's a
Those
comedy.
two things. And oh yeah, well yeah, it is. It's comedy. It does have its
Is that
its comedic.
Is that the one that where the seasons are like really spaced apart? Because I remember a medieval journey show in 2009, 2010, where it was like a group of kids, well, not really kids, but a group of young people just kind of on a journey, and there was like little jokes and stuff here. Is that
Yeah,
it? Because they had it.
Very yes, simple, exactly like that, and then it just into something just a little bit bigger, and then it just, like I said, it was so disappointed because it had a lot of potential in it, and that's the kind of
Yeah, that show's still
in
going, kind of.
Is it? Because
Yeah, they have huge breaks between their seasons because it is actually a rather expensive show for a period piece.
Okay, Adega, I'll check it out. I finished up Revolution, but I haven't started anything busy. So I'll do Blood Witch next.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of let's try and wrap up and everything. We kind of gone off a rabbit trail, but it's been a fun one to kind of steer us back on course and kind of start wrapping this up. I will say of Star Trek IV, it presented we've kind of hit on this, but I want to kind of punch it a little bit harder. This is the proper way to do a social commentary issue movie, but do it entertainingly and do it well balanced. And if these current movie makers want to address some sort of political or social or environmental issue, Star Trek IV is the way to do it right. And I think you can use the model that they used for this movie in just about any type of franchise, where it doesn't necessarily have to be a time travel story per se, but just the mixing of drama and humor and great character interaction and what have you. This is how you do a movie like this properly. And unfortunately, Hollywood has seemed to have forgotten about this little gem and everything called Star Trek IV. So,
because they're busy doing horrible things to Doctor Who.
Oh, we haven't forgotten about it. It's just the ones that like it are just not. We have to fight tooth and nail for the opportunity to tell those stories, but it works better when the ones that want to tell those stories get another movie that does well, like successfully. Because it's green that runs Hollywood more than Agenda, surprisingly. I know and work with a lot of writers who are assistants on shows and who are doing their own pitches and whatnot, and they all have very profound, amazing stories that they have that message, but it's very, very subtle. It's nuanced. It does fit in with like Star Trek and other films that address those situations, but it's for the time being, Hollywood doesn't think those things will sell right now, and so that's just how it is. The ones with the money don't think it'll sell, and the ones that wish they had the money do, and they try and find as many people as they can to contribute to get a production behind it, but it's not always successful. There is something of a pseudo monopoly right now with Disney, and that's kind of what's halting a lot of stuff.
And that's sad because there's so many people, I think, that are starving for that kind of entertainment.
Oh,
We are.
absolutely.
That kind of thought provoking, stuff that just makes you sit back and question everything that everything that you normally think. So
Great art, regardless of genre or medium, should do one thing: make
Entertain.
you entertain, but also make you think.
Yeah, I put out a thing
Um,
on Twitter earlier today where I thought, hey, it would be funny if we had like a positive slogan, and I titled it "Meth," which is "Make everyone think harder." And
I like that.
I was going to do it Mets, but I didn't want to get confused with the New York baseball team. But yeah, like because make everyone think smarter. But like, yeah, make everyone think harder. Like with your art, with your content, with your ideas. Just
Yeah.
it's bad enough that we've had almost 20 years of an education system where it's teach to test because that prohibits thinking. And it's also kind of communist if you think about it.
Well,
when they teach what to think, not how to think.
Exactly.
yes.
And that comes with a lot of things, with whatever the municipality needs education-wise, and then the teachers that are overburdened with too many kids in the class and not enough resources to address issues. So it's basically it's basically them pragmatically trying to do the job they can to compete, but it's also a double-edged sword where they're teaching memorization as opposed to processing. I that would probably be the better analogy. But that can change. I mean, especially if those that are writing stories, be it in book form or on YouTube or in movies and television, are able to hook in an audience that is kind of programmed and maybe sort of shake them loose of that programming and get them to think as their parents and grandparents did before. Maybe not exactly how they thought, but just the fact that they are thinking, which is more valuable, I would argue.
Oh,
And
Yes,
that can go a long way.
completely
well, and I
experience with that. What you're
well,
talking about is, and is to engage your young people while you're watching. Take my kids and my both of my nephews. Irritating to watch pop because I will pause the TV and I will talk to them about what's going on the show, and I make sure that they are following along. And so I tell them about the myth and the history behind this and that and the other thing, and why I'm upset and why this person is doing that. And so we if it's an hour episode, that's turned down into a 4-hour lecture. So and yeah, maybe it's a little overkill, but my point is to engage the people that are in the room with you instead of just watching and drooling at it, which is
Well,
that's
maybe
my
bookend it
opinion.
with some questions
I
at the start, and then be like, at the end, if you can get the answers right, you get a treat, and then the treat is you learn something, and they can either resent you for it or they can enjoy it for you.
well, the kids they're grown up adults, and now they do it
Okay.
themselves. Like my daughter will be watching Buffy with a friend, and she'll pause the episode and she'll discuss everything about that episode before moving on. So it's a trait that's
Kathia,
now yeah.
Kathia, do you realize
Sorry.
what you're doing?
Yeah.
No.
I
Do
know
you
what
realize
I'm
what you've
doing.
what you've turned? No. Do you realize what you've become? And this is not a bad thing. You've
I've
turned
become a
into the
legacy.
female.
I'm a legacy.
No, let me get this out.
Oh,
You have become
okay.
the female Mauler,
The female
and
who?
I say that
Come again?
Mauler.
Oh, you've got to go watch Mahler. He's fantastic.
Yeah, I just started finding out about him recently. He's I saw
He is.
the Last Jedi essay, which is
3-parter. Kathia, he has a thing that he does on his channel with a bunch of other guys, and it's called EFAP. Or
Yeah,
Okay.
every frame
a pause.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not what you think.
Yeah, okay. Wow, guilty of that. Yeah.
No.
It's a good thing.
You are carrying on. You have unintentionally become the female Mauler. You become the fem Mauler.
Mullet.
Oh
The mullet.
Millette.
No, Maulet. No, I like the Mauler. I like Famaller. That actually sounds cool. Oh my God.
Malarella, maybe.
Mahler.
No, that doesn't work. I think Famaller works better.
Mahler, yeah.
Famaller. Or Fem. No, Famaller. Wow. Okay. Oh my God.
I'll have to look it up. I
What'd I
didn't know that
miss?
that person
Because I'm still on the
existed.
stream.
So, yeah, I'll go look it up and see what's up.
Odega's
that is
last
all
comment
about.
was really funny.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
One harder.
Well, guys, I think
Oh no!
well, guys, I think we've thoroughly dissected the unintentional trilogy of Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. What do you all think? And then some.
Yep, and then some.
Great movie. Great movie.
Great movies all across the board. Well, I think we're gonna at least close out the broadcast. We may have a little after party after this, but do y'all want to plug your channels before we say goodnight to everybody?
Sure.
Start with Script Doctor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I am the Script Doctor. I'm a real Script Doctor. I'm currently just doing reviews and coverages of a couple of shows right now. I'm doing reviews of Batwoman and why that is poorly written and suggestions of how it can be made better. I've also been reviewing the Mandalorian. I had some technical hiccups over the holidays, but I should be getting my Chapter 7 review out sometime tomorrow or Tuesday, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at ScriptDoctorPhD, where I post little quips here and there, and also alert of when my videos drop. You can also find me at Drew Taylor's channel, Scream Heretic, on Thursday nights, where we discuss Battlestar Galactica, so check that out. And yeah, that's my bag right now.
Well, everybody, obviously I'm Sci-Fi Nation. My channel's about all things sci-fi related. I like to put out regular content when I can, and I'm always trying to stream here and there. You find me streaming on my channel. I stream with DJ Odyssey a lot on his channel. Check him out. You can find me in lots of different live streams, just in the chats, not on the streams. But we just, my channel, we like to hang out and have fun and, look at the positive side of things. And, because there's just, for me, too much negativity in YouTube land as it is. So we like to keep things upbeat and happy and just have a good time. So check it out.
I'm Speaker for the Dead. I got my name from the Orson Scott Card book of the same name, which is my favorite in that series. I love Orson Scott Card. A fantastic series of books. If you've never read them, you should go read them. They're called the Ender series. But yeah, right now on my channel, I'm breaking down The Expanse. I'm doing episode by episode reviews. Absolutely love that show. It's one of the greatest things to happen to sci-fi in quite a while, in my opinion. Very well done. A lot of fun to watch. And I just do a lot of breakdowns and reviews of different things and try to have fun and kind of like Sci-Fi Nation. I'm trying to be a lot more positive because I think it's too easy to become negative. So I'm trying to focus in on the things that make entertainment great and what we can do to get back there, as opposed to tearing everything down. Like one of my last videos was on Star Wars, and everybody's kind of saying Star Wars is dead. And I'm like, well, it's only dead if we let them kill it. So it's that kind of a thing, that hopeful thing where they can kill Star Wars in the future right now, but I'm going to teach my kids about the originals so that someday maybe they'll help reinvigorate the corpse of Star Wars and bring it back to life. So
enough people have the originals where it can be shared forever.
Yeah. Just focus on the awesome and help keep pop culture alive in a positive way. So yeah, that's just what I'm doing, and I loved listening to you guys tonight. This has probably been one of the funnest live streams I've been a part of, just to talk about Star Trek and everything. It's awesome.
And Speaker, you have been a wonderful panelist, and I will definitely have you back. And anytime you want me on, you let me know.
Awesome.
And Kathia, idea?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I was there saying before I inadvertently interrupted. I am
It's
Kathia
okay.
Starr, and my channel isn't about, well, it's about me and my weird life journey. And because pop culture is a part of my daily life, I talk a lot about pop culture. I talk a lot about myth, about other things that happen to me because I'm a budding artist. I'm a budding creator. I started writing, but things happened, and so I'm metamorphosing. I'm getting better. I'm in recovery, and I don't know where this is going to take me, but it's an adventure. I'm discovering that I'm having a lot of fun. So I'm exiting, like everybody else here, I'm exiting out of a darkness into the brighter side of things, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm kind of putting that on my channel. Um
And as always, you can find all of my panelists on YouTube and Twitter. And as for myself, I am simply the ambassador. Y'all know what I do. Pop culture, the 80s and 90s, Babylon 5. Eventually, we're going to get into Buffy, into Angel, and heaven only knows what else. You can follow me
Sign me up
on
for
Twitter
Buffy.
at oh, good grief. You can find me on Twitter at Rogue5778. And to everybody in the chat who was here tonight, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed this. I will say this is probably one of the best streams I've put on thus far, and it was because of everybody in the chat and my wonderful panel of guests. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Ambassador and friends signing off.
Good night.